On a stormy night, a man stumbled upon a time machine, complete with an instruction manual. He hopped inside and randomly punched in the year 3089. The machine whirred to life, and the man and the machine were gone in a flash. A short time later, the man returned, back from the year 3089. The futuristic world, along with the strange blue liquid on the machine, highlighted the era's strangeness. Riding the wave of excitement, the man took another trip, this time to the year 2037. He punched the gas and sped through the time tunnel, but his face held a mysterious expression this time. Unlike his previous enthusiasm, the man's name was He Jun, and he didn't keep his incredible experience a secret. He enthusiastically told a group of kids on the street about it. Of course, the kids didn't believe him. They might be young, but they weren't stupid. They figured this guy was a little off his rocker. Cut to He Jun suddenly appearing on a road with an old-timey feel. This is Wuzheng Village in the year 1987. This time, He Jun wasn't going to the future. He chose to travel to the past. He came to 1987 on an important mission, because in 2037, he witnessed a tragedy. He Jun couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He was a journalist, a man of integrity and fairness, driven to uncover the truth. To stay in the village, He Jun instantly puts on the act of a prophet, telling everyone that in about 30 seconds, 3 girls in this village, high on glue, will start screaming their heads off. Everyone's jaws dropped. Of course, all the people there thought he was just spouting nonsense. But the truth proved that what happened next was exactly what He Jun had said. A group of high school kids, totally wasted and stumbling, came running down the hill. Their parents freaked out and rushed to drag their kids back home. He Jun kept moving forward and managed to save a girl who almost slipped and fell off a cliff. He knew this girl was the one who got those kids hooked on drugs. Not far away, a bunch of reporters showed up with their cameras. If this whole mess got exposed, the village's reputation would be wrecked. Just like that, He Jun became the hero of Wuzheng Village, helping everyone out of this jam. Everyone was super welcoming, and He Jun introduced himself as the new teacher from Seoul. The principal immediately invited him to come and teach in the village. And just like that, He Jun successfully stayed in the village, living as a teacher for the next month. A month later, he fired up the time machine again and went back to his own time. He Jun went to the prison to meet a bearded man, the guy convicted of the serial killings in Wuzheng Village 34 years ago. The guy kept shouting that he was innocent. He Jun was silent for a moment and then said he believed him. That's why he went back to 1987, determined to find the real killer. As soon as he got out of jail, the guy immediately went to the meeting point to see He Jun. Before he revealed the truth, He Jun asked him a question first. If He Jun hadn't used the truth as bait this time, the guy probably would have died in prison. He Jun revealed what he saw when he traveled to 2037, exactly 1 year before he planned to take early retirement. He was curious to see what his life would be like later on, but what awaited him was a total tragedy. He had died a long time ago, exactly 1 year from the present, and the one who killed him was the real culprit behind the Wuzheng Village massacre. But the guy who was believed to be the killer croaked before he could be released, which is why He Jun believed he was innocent. After that, He Jun took out a matchbox, something the killer left behind at the crime scene. To stop his death from happening again, He Jun decided to time travel back to the past to investigate the truth. And he also believed the guy sitting in front of him wanted to clear his name, so he wanted to team up with him. And this matchbox, whether by accident or on purpose, also showed up in front of Yun Yong. Yun Yong is an editor, working as an assistant to a famous writer, Go Mi-suk. Mi-suk seems all gentle and intellectual on the outside, but she's bossy and arrogant, with a sharp tongue. The main thing is that her writing skills are nothing to write home about. Every time a manuscript comes out, Yun Yong has to rewrite almost the entire thing before it can be published. Most of the time, Yun Yong has to be at Mi-suk's beck and call. She's so swamped with work that she doesn't have any time to spend with her mom. That day, Yun Yong went shopping with Mi-suk at the mall, struggling with tons of bags, big and small. The stores occasionally had promotions going on, making it as lively as a bustling outdoor market. Yun Yong's mom was also among them. Because she was fighting over a bill, she got pushed and fell to the ground. Yun Yong was just about to call out to her mom when Mi-suk, standing next to her, scoffed. She said that people can be poor, but they shouldn't lose their dignity, and living like that is just pathetic. For some reason, after hearing this, Yun Yong felt a wave of shame and obediently followed Mi-suk. Right then, her mom turned her head and saw her daughter. She was about to call out to her, but Yun Yong had already hurried away. Her mom was disappointed and dejectedly walked home alone. After finishing up work, Yun Yong saw her mom on the side of the road. No matter how many times she yelled, her mom didn't respond. Yun Yong had no choice but to dash across the road, dodging the traffic. Her mom, clearly worried, took out a pair of new shoes for Yun Yong and said that a good pair of shoes will take you to good places. Embarrassed about changing shoes on the street, Yun Yong impatiently snapped at her mom, telling her not to bother with these small things anymore and to take care of herself more. She had a scarf that she'd been wearing for over 10 years, looking super old-fashioned. Her mom's smile instantly vanished. After putting away the old shoes, she turned and left, saying only that from now on, she wouldn't bother her anymore. Because of this, Yun Yong felt a pang of guilt. In a foul mood, she rejected a call from Mi Suk for the first time. That night, Yun Yong got some terrible news. Her mom was found drowned in the river. Only her shoes and a suicide note were left on the bank. Yun Yong was filled with regret and self-blame, but it was too late. Looking at her mom's cold body in the morgue, she couldn't hold back her sobs. While she was in deep sorrow, she received a dismissal message from Mi Suk, making her already sad life even sadder. Yun Yong, without a second thought, just deleted the message. Right then, she got a call saying her drunk dad was causing a scene and making trouble. Yun Yong, seemingly used to this kind of thing, told the caller to just send her the bank account number, and she'd send over the money for the damages. That night, Yun Yong sat by the river where her mom passed away, reading the suicide note. Suddenly, she saw a matchbox. Curious, she opened it, and inside was a piece of paper that had been soaked in water. Yun Yong struggled but could only make out the word, book. The rest was illegible. Just then, her alcoholic father showed up. As soon as Yun Yong saw him, she exploded in anger, because before she passed, her mom had called him several times, but he didn't pick up. The poor woman, who had worked hard and suffered her whole life, ended up with both her husband and daughter ignoring her. And in her helplessness and despair, she thought negatively. Yun Yong, blaming herself intensely, declared that if she could go back in time, she would stop her mom from getting anywhere near her dad. Yun Yong, sobbing, ran off and wandered on a mountain road. She wrapped her mom's scarf around her neck and walked through a tunnel. And this tunnel was the pathway for the time machine. Hae Jun, wanting to return to 1987, floored it and sped off at top speed. Suddenly, he saw the figure of a woman in front of him, but the car wouldn't stop, and Hae Jun had no choice but to swerve. The moment he hit Yun Yong, the time machine dragged her along too. After waking up from being unconscious, Yun Yong kept walking forward, but noticed something was off about the surroundings. She stared at a banner, and the year written on it was 1987. Yun Yong couldn't help herself and pulled out her phone, searching for a signal. She didn't believe in this ridiculous time travel stuff. While wandering around with her cell phone in hand, she suddenly saw her mom, but younger. Yun Yong froze for a full 5 seconds, then immediately ran after her, but someone pulled her back. Hae Jun pulled her into a small corner, looking a bit worried but carefully explained the whole situation to Yun Yong. They had traveled back to 1987, but because of the accident in the tunnel, the time machine was broken. Simply put, they were currently stuck and couldn't go back to their own time. Yun Yong, shocked, covered her mouth and started stammering. Hae Jun thought she was crying, but when Yun Yong lowered her hand, it turned out she was laughing with joy. Leaving Hae Jun confused, Yun Yong chased after her mom to a club. Her young mom, wearing a short skirt, nervously walked in. Yun Yong, without hesitation, followed right behind. No matter the era, the atmosphere in nightclubs is always more lively and bustling than ever. Her mom's friends immediately hit the dance floor as soon as they walked in, but she went to the restroom to calm her nerves. Yun Yong went into the restroom to find her mom. She couldn't believe her young mom was right there in front of her. She reached out and gently pinched her mom's cheek. The soft feeling on her fingertips made her gasp in surprise. Tears instantly started pouring down, and Yun Yong rushed to hug her mom tightly, repeatedly saying she was wrong. She would never be stubborn and argue with her mom again, and she wouldn't be embarrassed by her anymore. Yun Yong cried herself hoarse, making Sun-ae think she had encountered a pervert. She carefully stared at Yun Yong, noticing the wound on her forehead and her expression, which was a mix of crying and laughing, while she kept calling her Mom. Sun-ae immediately assumed the girl in front of her was on drugs. Thinking about this, Sun-ae got spooked by her guess and quickly ran out of the restroom. Coincidentally, the police suddenly raided the club, rounding up all the underage kids. Right at that moment, a dazed Sun-ae walked out, and her friends had already been caught. Officer Dong Sik-seop started staring intently at Yun Yong. Hae Jun appeared like a guardian angel and rescued all the girls, including Yun Yong. Dong Sik naturally wasn't having it, and he aggressively confronted Hae Jun. Hae Jun knew this cop. Many years later, he had visited him. After the serial murder and disappearance case in the village, he resigned and went into hiding for almost 30 years. The two stared each other down, neither willing to back down. It wasn't until the principal arrived that Dong Sik, out of respect for him, let the girls go. Sun-ae was also dragged home by her dad by the ear, and Yoon-young, at this point, had no choice but to follow Hae-jun. Hae-jun scolded Yoon-young for being reckless and running around in an unfamiliar time. If he hadn't shown up in the nick of time, she probably would have been mistaken for a spy because she didn't have any ID and would have spent the rest of her life behind bars. Yoon-young wanted to explain that she had seen her mom, but she swallowed her words halfway. Then she asked him who he was and why he hit her with his car, dragging her back to the past. Hae-jun thought for a moment and then decided to just take her to the scene where the time machine crashed. Yoon-young was completely astonished, her eyes wide with disbelief. But Hae-jun couldn't figure it out. When the time machine went through the tunnel, it usually turned invisible, basically unable to hit anything. Could it be that Yoon-young had something on her that could also time travel? Yoon-young looked at herself. The shoes were new, bought just today. She immediately shot back, saying, maybe it was something he did that accidentally caused this whole mess, like listening to music or answering the phone while going through the tunnel. This made Hae-jun instantly shut his mouth, feeling a pang of guilt, because at the moment the accident happened, he had been doing both of those things. While they were talking, a tractor slowly approached in the distance. The villagers saw their beloved teacher in trouble and immediately rushed to help tow the car back to the village. Hae-jun's place was a pretty big apartment. Although the decor was a bit simple, the style wasn't bad. Yoon-young was surprised. Having such a big house, being a teacher, and being loved by the villagers, Hae-jun didn't need to go back to the 20th century. Hae-jun didn't answer. He just promised that he'd fix the car quickly. In the meantime, she could stay at his place and shouldn't go running around. Also, she couldn't just change things willy-nilly. If the past changed even a little bit, it could have a huge impact on the future. Yoon-young nodded obediently, but inside, she was still thinking about how to find her mom. After setting up a sleeping area for Yoon-young, Hae-jun went to the garage to start working on the car, but the car's weird structure left him stumped. Looking at the date marked on the calendar, in a few days, the first murder would happen in Wujung village. He had to get Yoon-young back before then. Early the next morning, Mr. Lee, Sun-ae's dad, who would also be Yoon-young's future grandpa, suddenly knocked on Hae-jun's door, excitedly dragging him to the village's sports day. With Hae-jun being dragged away, Yoon-young finally peeked her head out the door. But after just 2 steps, Hae-jun's neighbor across the way also came out, and this person was none other than Sun-ae. Yoon-young was both overjoyed and surprised. Sun-ae wore a small backpack, and Yoon-young just followed her like a little tail. On the way, Sun-ae kept turning her head to look at Yoon-young with an uneasy expression. Finally, when they reached the river, she spoke to Yoon-young, asking her about what happened in the restroom that day and why she was crying so miserably. Yoon-young didn't know how to answer. The river not far away was where her mother jumped. Seeing Yoon-young still not speaking, Sun-ae took the initiative and introduced herself, saying they could be friends. But she asked Yoon-young to please stop calling her Mom, because it was creepy. Yoon-young, of course, happily agreed and immediately called out, Sun-ae, over and over. She followed her mom to the family's small store. Her grandparents had gone to the sports day event, leaving only Sun-ae to watch the shop. Yoon-young went to a corner, took out her cell phone, and secretly snapped a picture of her mom engrossed in a book by the window, remembering how her mom once said that she dreamed of becoming a writer when she was young. Yoon-young even felt a little scornful when she heard that. She quietly left the store and sat by the roadside, deep in thought. What exactly was it that made her travel back in time to this place? Yoon-young suddenly recalled that after her mom passed away, she had told her dad that if she could go back to the past, she wouldn't let her mom marry him, and she wouldn't have had to give birth to a child like her either, because both her dad and she only ever made her mom sad. Thinking of this, Yoon-young suddenly stood up. Her mom got married in 1988. It seemed like heaven had given her a chance to come and prevent her parents from getting together. While Yoon-young was sorting out her thoughts, a young guy walked past Sun-ae's family's little store. When Yoon-young returned, she saw her mom helping the young guy up. He was even giving her mom a goofy grin. Anyone could see what that was about. Yoon-young immediately went into alert mode, forcefully turning the guy's head towards her and sternly asking for his name. Sure enough, the person in front of her was her good-for-nothing dad when he was young. After saying that, she yanked the young guy away, warning him not to go near her mom again. The young guy's face was a picture of confusion. What did he do wrong? He wasn't about to give up, and boldly declared that he would show his best side to make Yoon Young change her mind. On the other side, Hae-jun won a prize at the sports day and successfully brought home a popular Walkman of that time. But when he got home, Yoon Young was nowhere to be seen. While tidying up the bed, he suddenly found the matchbox that Yoon Young had dropped. Hae-jun was extremely surprised and immediately opened the photo album on his phone. Although the paper in Yoon Young's matchbox was blurred, the words in the photo were very clear. Women who read are dangerous. When Yoon Young returned to the store again, her mom had already been dragged away by her friends long ago. While no one was around, Yoon Young took a peek at her mom's diary. But as soon as she opened it, her smile instantly faded. Because what her mom wrote in the diary was the same as the first novel My Suk published when she was 19. Yoon Young seemed to understand something and immediately ran to find Sun-ae. She saw her mom being pushed right into the river by her so-called friends, who stood on the bank excitedly watching the spectacle. Yoon Young instantly jumped into the water to save her mom, and then confronted the main girl in the group. She tried calling out the name, Mi Suk, but the one who answered was the girl standing behind her. She pretended to care about Sun-ae. Yoon Young, feeling utterly disgusted, forcefully pushed her hand away and took her mom back home. Yoon Young advised her mom not to let those girls bully her anymore, but Sun-ae felt wrong. She had always been isolated by her classmates since she was little, and only they were willing to hang out with her. If she lost even these friends, she would feel like her life wasn't worth living. Hearing these words, Yoon Young suddenly came to a realization. So her mom's loneliness and depression weren't caused by her and her dad. They had been there since she was a child. Before leaving, Sun-ae begged Yoon Young to pretend that today never happened. And everything that happened next tonight completely shocked Yoon Young. She told Hae-jun that she couldn't leave yet. She wanted to stay and keep her mom company until she didn't feel lonely anymore. She wanted to stay, to be with her mom until she got better. Hae-jun was silent, not saying anything. He just quietly put the matchbox in his hand back into his pocket and took Yoon Young home. Anyway, the time machine wasn't fixed yet, and they couldn't go back anytime soon. That night, Yoon Young was filled with worries. She never imagined that Mi-suk and her mom were classmates, and Mi-suk's debut novel was connected to her mom. Remembering how her mom was bullied by those bad friends, Yoon Young was so angry she wanted to pull her hair out. She couldn't just sit still anymore. She had to change everything, to take back what was stolen from her mom. If she wanted to easily get close to those people, the best way was to become their classmate. Thinking of this, Yoon Young immediately ran to find Hae-jun, saying she also wanted to go to school. Hae-jun was so shocked that he dropped the boiling kettle to the ground, because while he was making noodles, he couldn't stop thinking about the conversation he had with the murderer before. In Wujung village that year, there were 2 deaths and 1 disappearance, and all of them were high school girls. Hae-jun was deep in thought, trying to figure out how to infiltrate the group of girls and investigate them when Yoon Young suddenly came and demanded to go to school. Talk about the right person at the right time. While they were talking, the doorbell suddenly rang. It was Officer Dong-sik, coming to investigate. It turned out that just now, while patrolling the streets, he heard from the club's waiter that the girl living at Hae-jun's place was acting weird, like a spy. And it just so happened that during this time, the Department of Public Safety was cracking down hard on spies. As soon as the door opened, Officer Dong-sik burst in and went straight for Yoon Young. Because she didn't have any ID to prove who she was, he tried to drag her to the station. Seeing this, Hae-jun got a little flustered and had no choice but to close his eyes and lie, saying that Yoon Young was a high school student at Wujung High. Hearing Hae-jun say that, Yoon Young immediately put on an innocent face. Finally, she successfully infiltrated the school. The next day, Hae-jun took Yoon Young to school with him. As they were about to enter the gate, Yoon Young got nervous, unable to remember her fake ID number. Hae-jun, exasperated, pulled her aside, repeatedly emphasizing how badly things could turn out if she interfered with the past. But Yoon Young told him to relax. She wouldn't go around causing trouble. Even though she didn't know Hae-jun's purpose for returning to 1987, she was sure that both of their initial intentions were to make the future better. Hae-jun thought for a moment, and then agreed, telling her to focus on playing the role of a student well, and to come straight home after school. After saying that, Hae-jun took Yoon Young to the principal's office to handle her enrollment. Coincidentally, Officer Dong-sik also brought his nephew there. His nephew was none other than Baekhui Seop, Yoon Young's future father. While Hae-jun and Dong-sik were filling out the enrollment forms, Yoon Young and her dad went out to the hallway to talk. Yoon Young directly said that having a dad was the same as not having one, and that she was living with relatives. Then she threw Baekhui a sharp glare, saying that her dad was a real piece of work. from childhood to adulthood, in all the moments that needed a father and child present. He never once showed up, spending all his time hanging around in bars and fighting with other people. Baikwei's eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't help but exclaim how there could be such a terrible father in the world. Yunyang scoffed. They hadn't been talking peacefully for long before Yunyang's fiery temper flared up again, and she started getting physical. She pinched his ear hard, gritting her teeth and warning him to not go near her mom. Since schools in this era were segregated by gender, they were also separated. As soon as she walked into the classroom, Yunyang's eyes were immediately drawn to her mom's pure and innocent face. In a noisy and bustling environment, only her mom remained silent, holding a novel in her hand, quietly reading as if completely detached from the outside world. There was only one empty seat left, right next to Sun'e, so Yunyang naturally became her mom's deskmate. Sun'e was very happy about Yunyang's arrival, but the atmosphere was quickly broken by a shrill voice. The ringleader who pushed Sun'e into the river that day, along with her two friends, came up to Yunyang. Just one look and you could tell these guys were no good. Yunyang made a silent vow in her heart to teach these arrogant girls a lesson. This way, they wouldn't keep bothering her and her mom in the future. Without saying much, Yunyang stood right up and stared at the girl without any fear. Actually, this was a trick that her dad had taught Yunyang. Before they were about to be split into their classes, her dad suddenly pulled Yunyang up to the rooftop and told her about this attack move. A kid without a dad around to protect them needs to have some ability to defend themselves. When facing an enemy, you have to shift their gaze downwards, then take the opportunity when they look down to quickly strike. Yunyang successfully used this method, causing the ringleader to get a bloody nose. She screamed in anger, about to launch into a full-on brawl, but Mi-suk coldly told them to stop because their loud voices were disturbing her. The trio could only angrily return to their seats. Right then, the bell rang, signaling the start of class, and the handsome and radiant teacher, Hae-jun, walked into the classroom. Handsome, kind, easygoing, and upright, Hae-jun seemed to be the prince, charming in the eyes of the girls. Sun'e was no exception, totally smitten with him. Yunyang heard her mom counting down the numbers, 5 seconds ending. Hae-jun started his rapid-fire lecture mode, talking non-stop. After the teacher finished, Sun'e leaned over and whispered to Yunyang. Every day before class, Teacher Hae-jun rambles on like this. Everyone's already sick of hearing it. But even so, Hae-jun was still the super handsome guy in the girls' hearts. After school, Yunyang couldn't find her mom anywhere and went around looking for her. Finally, in an abandoned classroom, she witnessed firsthand the scene of Mi-suk asking her mom to revise the draft of the novel. Yunyang was extremely surprised. Turns out, whether it was the past or the future, Mi-suk's novels were always edited by others. She never actually wrote any of them herself. Yunyang angrily snatched the manuscript her mom handed to Mi-suk. Inside, it was covered in red marks, almost completely rewritten. Old grudges and new resentments combined. Yunyang grabbed her mom's hand, wanting to tell Hae-jun about this. Who would have guessed that right then, Mi-suk would suddenly clutch her head and scream, acting like she was in extreme pain. Sun'e, as if under a spell, immediately pushed Yunyang's hand away and ran to comfort Mi-suk, even saying that she willingly helped her revise the manuscript and told Yunyang not to be nosy. Yunyang was shocked, speechless, not understanding why her mom was so obedient to her. As Mi-suk's behind-the-scenes helper for many years, Yunyang knew very well that Mi-suk would never treat something considered a tool to help her with genuine kindness. So her mom must have been blinded by something to be so submissive. Yunyang swore that she would investigate the truth and save her mom from the wolf's claws. Finally, the school day ended, because Hae-jun said he would come to her class to pick her up and go home together. Yunyang just sat there and waited. Sun'e, scared, didn't dare to talk to Yunyang, just hugging her bag and shyly leaving the classroom with her head down. Before leaving, Mi-suk also warned Yunyang to be careful. If she were an ordinary girl, hearing such words would make her scared. But Yunyang is pretty, not stupid. She was no longer a child, and understood very well Mi-suk's dirty tricks. She chased after Mi-suk and directly declared that she wasn't afraid of anything. Not only that, Yunyang also exposed this green tea's fake act, warning her not to harm her mom. Mi-suk let out a cold laugh and just uttered one sentence. "So it's you." Right then, Mi-suk's brother, Min-soo, came to pick up his sister from school, but Mi-suk ignored him and took a taxi home by herself. He knew his sister well. Her methods wouldn't be that simple. At this moment, it suddenly started to rain heavily. Min-soo kindly offered Yunyang a ride and conveniently continued to talk about his sister. Min Soo said that the words his sister said earlier weren't a provocation, but just a probe to find Yoon Young's weakness. As long as she grasped the opponent's weakness, everything would easily fall under her control. Yoon Young suddenly had a realization, so Mi Suk was playing mind games. But why would Min Soo reveal his sister's secret like that? What was his motive? As soon as Yoon Young finished asking, she felt a strong blow to the back of her neck. Min Soo slammed her head against the car, knocking her out instantly. When she woke up, Yoon Young was in Min Soo's house. He revealed his true colors, clearly having bad intentions towards Yoon Young. Luckily, at the critical moment, Hae-jun arrived just in time, breaking down the door and teaching this scumbag a lesson. Turns out, Min Soo was the guy who was wrongly arrested. Although he wasn't the real killer, his sleazy nature was undeniable. Just a while ago, Hae-jun couldn't find Yoon Young in the classroom, which made him think of the pervert who was arrested that year. That's how he managed to arrive in time to rescue Yoon Young. Hae-jun didn't hold back, and after punching him to a pulp, he immediately called the police. Back home, he helped Yoon Young treat the wound on her forehead. Yoon Young was also very curious. How did Hae-jun know to come and save her? Hae-jun calmly took the matchbox from his pocket and handed it to her. Hae-jun took out the matchbox and asked Yoon Young how she got it. Yoon Young honestly answered that about an hour before being hit by Hae-jun's car, she found it beside the river where her mom took her own life. Hearing this, Hae-jun didn't ask further questions and got up to go to his room. Unexpectedly, Yoon Young kept persistently asking what this matchbox was and why Hae-jun was so interested in it. Hae-jun had no choice but to say that this thing was very important to him. It was the reason he traveled back in time. In 3 days, the first murder in Woojung village will happen. But because of Yoon Young's appearance, the future has changed. That year, after the case happened, the police arrested 3 suspects: Baek Hui, Yoon Young's dad, Beom Ryong, Baek Hui's friend, and Min Soo. He went to the police station to give a statement. Then he went to Min Soo and told him to just stay put and not do anything, and he'd be safe and keep his life. Early the next morning, Hae-jun had to go out. He left a note on the table, telling Yoon Young to help him return the borrowed items to the neighbor next door after she woke up. This errand made Yoon Young extremely happy, because the neighbor's house was her mom's house. After taking a shower and getting ready, Yoon Young excitedly took the things over to the neighbor. As it turned out, she saw the entire family there, from her grandpa and grandma to her aunt and uncle. Yoon Young gave an awkward smile. Having a close and happy family gathered together was truly a wonderful feeling. Her grandma came over and touched Yoon Young's face, not understanding why she liked this young girl so much. She stuffed a homemade lunchbox into Yoon Young's hands, telling her to look out for her daughter at school from now on, and to come over to their house anytime. Yoon Young was overjoyed inside. Hae-jun went out early in the morning to find Beom Ryong. Turns out, Baek Hui had asked him to help deliver love letters to Sun A. After observing for a while, Beom Ryong sought out Yoon Young, asking for her help. But they hadn't talked for long when Hae-jun showed up and chased him away. And Hae-jun also noticed that Beom Ryong had stuffed a love letter into a matchbox. And this matchbox was exactly like the one the killer used. Actually, Hae-jun had been secretly following Beom Ryong for the past few days and discovered that he hid some kind of envelope in the wall of the restroom. Hae-jun had secretly opened it, but it was empty. Nothing inside. Yoon Young and her mom walked to school together. Halfway there, Sun A shyly slipped a letter into Yoon Young's hand, apologizing for what happened yesterday. Yoon Young opened the letter and read it. Her mom hadn't changed. Before, every time they argued, her mom wouldn't dare to talk to her face to face, and used letters to communicate instead. Yoon Young generously forgave her mom, and the two were close again, just like before. On the way, Sun A kept talking about her favorite novel. At home, she didn't have much time to read. Her parents, along with her siblings, made the house always noisy and crowded. Because of that, her dream was simply to one day be able to freely read and listen to music without being disturbed by others. Yoon Young felt both ashamed and touched. She wanted to make it up to her mom, to give her back everything she had given up. Today was the school field trip day, and the male and female students in the senior classes could finally meet. Everyone was very excited. On the way, Baek Hui enthusiastically struck up a conversation with Sun A. Seeing this, Yoon Young immediately hurried over. But modern people, lacking physical activity, she was out of breath just trying to keep up with these two. Baek Hui used the excuse that they would be scolded if they were late and grabbed Sun A's hand to go ahead. Yoon Young, helpless, could only lie on the ground panting. Even when Hae-jun noticed her poor physical condition, she still stubbornly insisted that she just stop to admire the sky. After all the students gathered, it was time for entertainment. because he heard that Sun A liked guys who could sing well. Our dear old dad took this opportunity to enthusiastically perform a song with his guitar, using his natural charm to flirt. The performance was applauded by all the girls, including Sun A. Who knew that the future alcoholic father also had such an outstanding side? While everyone was enthusiastically cheering for Bai Kui, Hae-jun's attention was elsewhere. The principal, along with a woman, slowly walked over. She was Lee Ju, who was about to start her internship at the school. She was also the first murder victim 2 days later. Yun Yong stared at Teacher Lee, feeling like she had seen her somewhere before. During lunchtime, Yun Yong and her mom were happily eating their bento boxes when a male student suddenly came over and handed each of them a matchbox. Sun A expertly opened the matchbox and took out a small piece of paper. Yun Yong turned her head and noticed that all the girls had a matchbox like that in their hands. Looking at the matchbox in her hand was exactly like the one she found by the river many years later, and it also had a piece of paper inside. Yun Yong couldn't help but think of Hae-jun. He once said that this matchbox was very important to him, which meant that Hae-jun knew something. Just then, Hae-jun arrived. The two looked at each other for a long time, until they were interrupted by Mi-suk's piercing scream from afar. They saw Teacher Lee running over to gently comfort Mi-suk. After lunch break, Hae-jun went directly to see Teacher Lee, asking her a few related questions. Teacher Lee said that she had relatives in Wujung village, so she chose to do her internship here. But Hae-jun knew that she was lying. She didn't have any relatives left in the world. What was her purpose in saying that? The field trip ended, and the students started heading down the mountain. Sun A carelessly left her water bottle behind and went back to get it. While waiting, Yun Yong ran into Mi-suk. Mi-suk questioned if she was the one who caused her brother to be taken to the police station. Yun Yong coldly replied that it was because he did something despicable. She was the victim, and sending him to jail was only natural. After saying that, Yun Yong asked Mi-suk back if she was probing for her weakness. Mi-suk, with an impassive face, calmly answered, why would she need to look far when it was already so obvious that her weakness was Sun A? She knew Yun Yong was wary of her. Whether she would use Sun A to get revenge on Yun Yong depended on whether she was angry about her brother being sent to jail. She let Yun Yong slowly guess about that. That evening, back at home, Hae-jun couldn't stop thinking. The murders were going to happen, and he was debating whether or not to tell Yun Yong about it. Right then, the phone rang. The principal informed him that they couldn't reach Teacher Lee. Hae-jun immediately rushed out to search for her, as if he didn't have enough to worry about. He also received news that Min-soo had been released. Hae-jun was on pins and needles. While running down the street, he bumped into Yun Yong. Yun Yong, with a worried look on her face, asked if Teacher Lee was going to die. Turns out, Yun Yong remembered why Teacher Lee looked so familiar. It was because her style of dress was exactly like the character described in Mi-suk's manuscript, and that novel was the diary that recorded the characterized murder process from the author's perspective. Hearing Yun Yong's words, Hae-jun froze for a full 5 seconds. How did she know Teacher Lee was about to die? Yun Yong slowly took out the manuscript. The unsolved case from many years ago turned out to be the prototype for the famous novel. Based on the memory from the novel, Yun Yong led Hae-jun to the riverbank, where they found Teacher Lee curled up in a corner, trembling. She seemed to be terrified. Not far away, Hae-jun caught sight of a strange shadowy figure lurking behind some bushes. He immediately took off running after him. Just when he was about to catch him, he was accidentally blocked by Dong-sik's car. In the blink of an eye, the figure of the killer vanished without a trace. Hae-jun, furious, grabbed Dong-sik by the collar and confronted him. Not only did he release Min-soo early, but now he also obstructed him from catching the killer. Whether it was intentional or not, Hae-jun directly expressed his dislike. He coldly criticized Dong-sik for being an irresponsible police officer, and said it was better if the two of them never met again, to avoid him getting into trouble again. After saying that, Hae-jun went back to the riverbank. Teacher Lee had returned to her normal state. When confronted by Yun Yong, Lee Ju just said she got lost and wasn't harmed by anyone. Although Hae-jun and Yun Yong both knew very well that Teacher Lee was lying, she refused to tell the truth, and they were helpless. So Hae-jun decided to play along, ignoring Lee Ju and leaving first. Then he secretly followed her. He saw Lee Ju safely return to her inn, and nothing unusual happened along the way. Hae-jun suddenly turned his head and stared intently at Yun Yong. It was time for the two of them to honestly reveal everything. The two went to a tea house, the same Bong Bong tea house, written on the outside of the matchbox. They chose a quiet little corner and sat down. Hae-jun went first, introducing himself as a journalist. He traveled back in time to investigate the 1987 Wuzheng village serial murder case. 2 days later, the first case happened, and 4 days after that was the second case. He Jun hadn't even finished speaking when Yun Yang quickly chimed in, saying that after that came the case of the missing woman. The police, based on a note the victim left behind, assumed that she had run away from home, but in reality, that woman was also gone. He Jun was truly going from one surprise to another, because everything Yun Yang said was news he had never heard before. Where did she learn all this? At this moment, Yun Yang took out Mi-suk's manuscript, saying that everything was from it, never expecting it to actually be happening in the real world. Yun Yang suddenly remembered a point that He Jun should pay attention to, telling him to turn to the next page. Mi-suk had written with her own hand that the culprit would never be caught, because that person is me. He Jun recalled that after Min-soo was arrested, he always maintained his innocence, and he believed it, but based solely on the contents of the novel, it couldn't be definitively determined that Mi-suk was the culprit. After all, novels are just fictional stories, but Yun Yang thought otherwise. She argued with He Jun. If Mi-suk wasn't the killer, how could she know the details of the case so clearly? Seeing Yun Yang so agitated, He Jun sensed a not-so-subtle anger. Yun Yang stared intently at He Jun. Based on her understanding of Mi-suk, she was certain that she was capable of committing murder. Just as He Jun was about to ask more, Sun-A's clear voice suddenly came from the next table. Turns out, Baekhui had asked her out on a date and kept saying he wanted to propose to her. Without saying much, Yun Yang immediately switched into battle mode, rushing over and beating the guy up without holding back. At this point, Sun-A took a flower out of her backpack and returned it to Baekhui, rejecting his confession, saying that she already liked someone else, and that person was waiting for her downstairs. Yun Yang and Baekhui quickly looked down to see who it was, and it turned out to be Beom-ryong. The father and daughter almost simultaneously covered their mouths in surprise. This action gave He Jun a clue. After Sun-A left, he immediately pulled Yun Yang aside to get to the bottom of it. Having no choice, Yun Yang awkwardly explained that Baekhui and Sun-A were her future biological parents. The reason she was preventing them from being together was that she didn't want them to get married. Whether as a husband or a daughter, all they brought to her mom was endless loneliness and isolation, ultimately leading her to choose death. And that matchbox was what she found right next to the spot where her mom jumped into the river. In just one short evening, He Jun received so much big news. After returning home, he immediately went into his study and started to think things through carefully, resting his head in his hands. Suddenly, he turned his head to look at the photo of the three suspects, his gaze stopping on Baekhui's picture. Early the next morning, He Jun took Yun Yang to a secluded lakeside and told her that tomorrow the first murder would occur. A matchbox was found next to the body, and inside was a piece of paper with a message: "Women who read are dangerous." In the second case, a similar matchbox and piece of paper also appeared. He Jun believed that it was the killer's signature mark. The strange thing was, why did this item appear next to where Yun Yang's mom took her own life? He Jun suspected that on the day she passed away, she met the real killer there again. Now, the only person who could protect her mom from death was Yun Yang. Today was the day the test results were announced. As expected, Sun-A was still at the top of the class, which made both her and Yun Yang extremely happy. At this moment, the bullying trio received a signal from Mi-suk's eyes. As if receiving an order, they immediately started making trouble with Sun-A. Yun Yang stood in front of her mom without any fear. The ringleader aggressively stepped forward and tore up the report card. The two sides were about to come to blows. Luckily, the disciplinary teacher arrived in time to stop them. Over on the boys' side, the test results were also out, but the list only showed the result of the one person at the bottom, which was Beom-ryong. Baekhui, with a puzzled look, stared at him, not understanding what Sun-A saw in him. Even though he diligently read every day, he still ranked last. At this moment, Beom-ryong's gaze suddenly shifted to the distance. Teacher Lee walked out of the classroom, and Beom-ryong kept staring at her back, then shyly scratched his head. Although Yun Yang hated Mi-suk, she was finally convinced by He Jun that she might not be the real killer, but the killer could be the man hiding by the river that night. The reason why He Jun came to this conclusion was because, based on the past timeline, on the night Teacher Lee died, she went to the Bongbong tea house to meet a man wearing a blue hat. Then she was murdered on the way back to her inn, and the man He Jun chased that day was also wearing a blue hat. So he decided that tomorrow he would follow Lee Ju to personally witness the killer's crime process. However, on the day of the incident, things changed, and the one causing chaos was still He Jun's archenemy, Dong Sik. He found out from a colleague that Lee Ju had 3 prior convictions. So the next morning, Dong Sik stormed into the school, wanting to arrest her. Seeing this, Li Ju immediately took off running, sprinting to the bus stop at the edge of the village, and buying a ticket for the next bus. Yun Yang chased after her, advising her not to leave, but she misunderstood and thought that Yun Yang and He Jun were the ones who reported her. She then took out a knife and threatened Yun Yang, taking her hostage. At the critical moment, He Jun arrived in the nick of time, successfully subduing Li Ju and hiding her in the ticket booth. In the evening, He Jun replaced Li Ju and went to the tea house, waiting for the man in the blue hat to appear. After a while, a man wearing a blue hat walked in, and this person turned out to be Bei Kui. The moment he saw Bei Kui, He Jun's emotions were incredibly complex. If the man in the blue hat was the real killer in the serial murder case, then that meant in the future, he was the one who killed his wife, including He Jun. Thinking of this, He Jun forced himself to calm down. First, let's just let tonight's events play out according to the original plan. According to Li Ju's account, that night she just came here to drink tea and read. She didn't have a date with anyone, but the man in the blue hat just sat down in front of her, and the two exchanged a few words, and then argued. And the tea house owner saw this whole scene. Just as He Jun was still analyzing, a figure suddenly ran past. Byung Ryong sat down in the seat that was supposed to be Li Ju's. As soon as he sat down, he started excitedly recounting that Li Ju was a communist, someone who opposed the government of that time, and had been imprisoned multiple times. But Bei Kui didn't care. He just calmly took out a wooden ring and placed it on the table. This was the ring that Li Ju always wore on her hand. Turns out, Bei Kui had also discovered Byung Ryong's secret. He was always hiding in the restroom, but not to use the toilet. Bei Kui, curious, went in to check and found the ring hidden behind a brick on the wall. Bei Kui sternly warned Byung Ryong not to do these sneaky, stupid things anymore. If his girlfriend found out, wouldn't it hurt her? The expression on Byung Ryong's face quickly changed, strangely. Finally, he used a pleading tone to beg Bei Kui to keep his secret. He promised to personally return the ring to Teacher Li and apologize to her. Bei Kui chose to trust him one more time, returned the ring to him, and turned to go home with his brother. Byung Ryong turned onto a different road. He Jun also left the tea house and quietly followed Byung Ryong. The strange thing was that the road he took was the road to Li Ju's inn. Byung Ryong walked to Teacher Li's inn and very naturally walked inside. Just as He Jun was about to follow, a familiar voice suddenly came from the alley next to him. It was Min Su. He was currently viciously beating his sister. He Jun ran over and knocked him down. After dealing with the two siblings, He Jun quickly returned to the inn. He just happened to run into Byung Ryong coming out the door. Bei Kui also arrived. The three of them just stared at each other, all surprised by the other's presence. He Jun's mind became even more confused. Who would have thought that the three suspects in the case, plus the new character Mi-suk, would all appear around the inn at the same time? Of course, tonight yielded no results. So, after returning, facing Yun Yang's questioning, He Jun just gently shook his head, saying that he didn't see the man in the blue hat. Yun Yang was skeptical. He Jun was out of the house for a full 3 hours. If nothing happened, why would it take so long? Before she could ask further, there was suddenly a knock on the door. He Jun opened it and saw Sun-A with a very worried expression. She heard from her dad that Yun Yang was threatened with a knife by Teacher Li today. Sun-A was worried that Yun Yang would be traumatized and scared, so she warmly invited her to sleep over at her house tonight. He Jun immediately agreed and then urged Yun Yang to take this opportunity to make up with her mom. Although Yun Yang was a bit hesitant, she was still very happy inside. Arriving at Sun-A's room, it was filled with the air of youthful girlhood. Posters of famous male stars and bookshelves everywhere reflected the warm yellow light, creating a very pleasant feeling. Sun-A hugged a blanket and lay down with Yun Yang, but kept fidgeting, unable to sleep, seemingly having something on her mind. Yun Yang warmly asked what was wrong. It turned out that although Sun-A agreed to go out with Byung Ryong, she kept thinking about Bei Kui. At the meeting at the tea house that day, Bei Kui had confessed his feelings to her, even though they hadn't known each other for long. From the first time he saw Sun-A, Bei Kui knew that this girl was his destiny. When she was immersed in her world, she exuded a captivating aura, unintentionally radiating a deadly charm, like a fairy descending to earth. Hearing Bei Kui's cheesy romantic descriptions, Sun-A's young heart also started to flutter. Yun Yang listened quietly. She again recalled Mi-suk's debut novel, which also had the same flowery words her dad had once said. At that time, Yun Yang particularly liked it and even copied it down. Because of these words, Yun Yang became a loyal fan of Mi-suk. Who would have thought that the youthful emotions and blossoming love that once sparkled in Yun Yang's memory were only endless arguments and a broken family. After Yoon Young left, Hae-jun continued to think about what happened after he simultaneously encountered Baek-hwi and Beom Ryong at the inn's entrance. Hae-jun played the role of a strict teacher, questioning them about why they were there. Beom Ryong said he wanted to return the ring to teacher Lee. Baek-hwi hesitated a bit and just said he was taking a walk. Hae-jun naturally didn't believe it, but he couldn't think of a specific reason. Early the next morning, he and Lee Ju went back to the inn to pack her luggage and had Sun A's dad quietly drive her out of the village on his bus. Right then, several fire trucks rushed past, heading straight for the old house under the persimmon tree. As it turned out, the house under the persimmon tree was burning fiercely. Perhaps this was a complication after changing history. In Hae-jun's memory, that house had also burned down, but no one died. But now, he and Dong-sik had to make an effort to rescue the children trapped inside the house. Luckily, everyone was okay. After going through this incident, Hae-jun's mood also underwent a big change. If he changed history, saving someone who was supposed to die, then someone else would have to take their place. Thinking of this, Hae-jun felt a little worried and scared. He returned home in a daze. Yoon Young had been reading and rereading Mi-suk's novel, wanting to find some clues about the blue hat. Although there was nothing about the blue hat, Yoon Young discovered that a man with blue hair appeared. She thought it was the same person, but Hae-jun didn't react. Yoon Young suddenly realized that since returning last night, Hae-jun's mental state had been off. Could it be that he already knew who the person wearing the blue hat was but just didn't want to tell her? Faced with Yoon Young's questioning, Hae-jun, who was already confused, suddenly lost control and directly confessed that he was the fifth victim of the massacre. He traveled through time just to save himself. And Yoon Young's appearance was the biggest variable that messed everything up. Yoon Young, after hearing this, was a bit defiant, questioning why he thought she would ruin everything. Hae-jun remained silent. Yoon Young, angry, wanted to investigate who this person wearing the blue hat was on her own. Arriving at school, Yoon Young began to study the sentences in the novel and asked her mom for her opinion. Sun-ae said that these sentences were a bit ambiguous. Only the person who wrote them could understand. Everyone brings their logic and habits into each sentence. Having no other choice, Yoon Young decided to try and ask Mi-suk, how should one interpret a man standing between the sun and the moon for what seemed like forever? Mi-suk thought for a while, and then said, isn't Sun and Moon the name of the record store in town? Yoon Young immediately ran to that record store, and, sure enough, saw a man wearing a blue hat. And this man was Baek-hwi's older brother, Baek-yu. That evening, Yoon Young told Hae-jun about this discovery. Hae-jun recalled the day they parted ways at the tea house. Baek-hwi had left with his brother. If this blue hat originally belonged to Baek-yu, then everything could be explained. He suddenly realized that all this time, he had been investigating in the wrong direction. Perhaps Baek-yu was the biggest suspect. In Yoon Young's memory of this uncle, he was just a person with a memory disorder, who had repeatedly snuck into her room and tore up pages of Mi-suk's novel, making Yoon Young extremely angry. But her dad always took his side. After all, they were family. Unable to find any useful clues, Hae-jun had no choice but to go directly to Baek-hwi to confirm. Under relentless questioning, Baek-hwi finally admitted that the hat belonged to his brother, and on the night Hae-jun went to the tea house in place of Lee Ju. It was his brother who told him to wear this blue hat to her inn and check if the light on the second floor was still on. Now, all the clues pointed to Baek-yu, and Yoon Young naturally also thought that the culprit of the serial killings was her uncle. Hae-jun advised her not to jump to conclusions. The killer would strike the second victim tomorrow. Everything would become clear then. The second victim was none other than Sun-ae's older sister, Jong-ae. Hae-jun rented the house opposite them, also because he wanted to wait for the killer to fall into the trap. At 9 p.m. tonight, she would appear at the Bong Bong tea house and be murdered by the killer. To prevent any mishaps, the two started paying attention to Jong-ae from early in the morning, secretly following her and witnessing the entire argument between the two sisters. It turned out that at the dinner table earlier, Jong-ae wanted to ask her mom for money. She wanted to collect enough 500,000 won to pay the agency, to realize her dream of becoming Miss Korea. But her mom yelled that she didn't have any money. Right then, Sun-ae chimed in, saying she needed a little more money, which combined with her savings, would be just enough to hire a tutor. Obviously, this request was also rejected. But as soon as they stepped outside, their mom secretly slipped some pocket money to her beloved son. Jong-ae felt that her sister had deliberately mocked her at the dinner table earlier, thinking that their parents should invest in someone academically gifted like her, and not someone who just fooled around like her. The most ridiculous thing was that Sun-ae had no idea that her dad didn't want her to go to college, was ready to marry his daughter off as soon as possible, and placed all his hopes on his precious little boy. Sun-A didn't want to follow the path her dad laid out. Even without money to hire a tutor, she was still determined to get into college on her merit. To prove she's capable, Sun-A takes all the money that was supposed to be for a tutor and gives it to her sister to chase her dream of becoming Miss Korea. This makes Jong-A feel a bit guilty inside. Yun-Young and Hae-Jun happen to overhear their conversation. They see Sun-A sitting alone and sad by the river. But because catching the killer is the priority, Yun-Young can't go comfort her mom. Instead, she and Hae-Jun go back to tailing Jong-A. They find her at a phone booth. A little later, a car pulls up, and a guy who looks like a total goon steps out. Jong-A gives him 500,000 won that she's been saving up. He promises it'll make her Miss Korea. Suddenly, Jong-A thinks about how her sister could use this money for college, and her conscience kicks in. She changes her mind and demands her money back. But this guy wouldn't let a fat sheep that had come into his hands just slip away. Who would have thought that the next second, Jong-A suddenly jumped up and rushed into the car, determined to fight them? To save her aunt, Yun-Young ignored Hae-Jun's attempts to stop her and quickly ran over, giving the guy a painful kick. The two sides just went at each other, fighting. Baek-Yu suddenly appeared and neatly dealt with the scoundrel, who was about to attack Hae-Jun. Finally, with the help of the people around, the scammers were successfully caught. Hae-Jun looked at the young man in front of him, wondering why he had appeared there. But before he could even think, Dong-Sik led the police over and took the whole gang of scammers back to the station. After everything was settled, they realized both Baek-Yu and Jong-A had vanished without a trace. Only then did they panic and decide to act according to the plan they had discussed the day before. Last night, Hae-Jun had predicted that if Jong-A suddenly disappeared along the way, Yun-Young would go to the place where Baek-Yu might appear, while he would go to the most dangerous place, which is the scene of the massacre. He did this because he had been to the scene of his death in the future, thinking that just because he accidentally met a scumbag, he was harmed in such an inexplicable way, and his body was thrown into the cold river. How could he not feel heartbroken? Thinking about the victim somewhere who had the same experience as him, Hae-Jun felt a surge of empathy and wanted to save these innocent people's lives. The two of them split up and started searching all the places the killer might turn up. They searched until night fell, but still no luck. But thankfully, that meant the murders hadn't happened yet. Then it hit Yun-Young that they'd been so focused on where the killer might be that they'd overlooked the most important place, the Bongbong Tea House. So, the two of them rushed over to the tea house. And sure enough, they found Jong-A there, happily singing away. What's even more surprising is that Min-Soo was also in the crowd. He was sentenced to over 30 years in prison as the real killer, but always kept denying all the charges. Based on Hae-Jun's guess, one of the two must be lying. While they were waiting, Yun-Young happened to see Beom-Ryung and her mom walking hand in hand down the street. Suddenly remembering the suspects in the massacre, Beom-Ryung was also one of them. Worried that her mom might be in danger, Yun-Young immediately got up and chased after them. Beom-Ryung took Sun-A to an inn. Sun-A said her goodbyes, and Beom-Ryung was fine with it. But first, he had to get what he wanted. Sun-A would rather die than give in, firmly refusing. Right then, Yun-Young flew in like a superhero and gave Beom-Ryung a good whack on the head. Blood rushed to his head, and this guy was ready to go all out and take them both down. Luckily, Baek-Hui showed up just in time and pinned him to the wall, their so-called brotherhood officially ending right there. At the same time, Jong-A's singing group called it a night, everyone heading home. Min-Soo unexpectedly followed Jong-A. Min-Soo followed Jong-A to a bridge, then enthusiastically invited her to another place for round 2 of drinks. Jong-A flat out refused. His rotten reputation in this village was known to everyone. She didn't want to associate with a scumbag. Min-Soo got triggered, lost it, and went straight to grab Jong-A. Jong-A fought back, kicking him hard in the leg. Who would have guessed this guy would lose his balance and tumble off the bridge? Hae-Jun went down to check on him, confirming he only had minor injuries, nothing life-threatening. Hae-Jun ignored him and took Jong-A back to safety first. He gently comforted Jong-A, saying even though she couldn't become Miss Korea, her singing and dancing were pretty good, and she had a unique and fashionable sense of style. Hearing those compliments come out of Hae-Jun's mouth, Jong-A immediately perked up, getting back her usual confidence. Hae-Jun took out the money they'd gotten from the scammers and returned it to her. Then Jong-A gave that money back to her little sister. The two sisters hugged each other, sobbing. That night, it was pouring rain, but the two still didn't forget their mission to watch the two sisters from the window across the street. Jiang A happily blow-dried her little sister's hair. It was the first time the two of them got along so well. Yun Yang was grateful that He Jun had done all of this for her family. It's just too bad that they still hadn't caught the killer tonight. The phone in the house rang. He Jun went to pick it up, and Byom Ryong's trembling voice came from the other end of the line. She's gone. The camera cuts to a shot of Lee Ju, her hands tied in front of her chest with a red cord, lying lifeless on the riverside rocks. He Jun and Yun Yang rushed to the scene. He Jun stood to the side, staring at Lee Ju's body. Yun Yang checked her belongings and found a matchbox from the Bong Bong tea house in her pocket. Inside was a piece of paper with the message, "Women who read books are dangerous." He Jun gradually regained his composure, and he grabbed Byom Ryong by the collar. Obviously, He Jun considered Byom Ryong the killer. Byom Ryong hurriedly denied it, saying that he took out Lee Ju's ring. This ring was actively given to him by teacher Lee yesterday afternoon. The two of them only talked for a few sentences. Who knew that today she would be murdered? He Jun suddenly realized that Lee Ju hadn't left town at all. And the reason Byom Ryong was so scared was because Lee Ju was an anti-government communist, being hunted by the government. They had met twice, but he didn't report it, fearing that after the police found out, he would get dragged into it too. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Two murders happened at the same time, and the second victim was Jiang A. The death was the same as Lee Ju's, with the hands tied tightly with a red cord, and a Bong Bong tea house matchbox in the pocket too. After confirming the scene, He Jun immediately pulled Yun Yang home and locked the door tightly. At this moment, his heart was raging, like he'd been hit hard in the chest. He Jun thought they should go back to the real world. No matter how hard they tried, the outcome didn't change at all. He Jun decided to speed up the repair of the time machine. He locked himself in a room, torturing himself and rethinking everything. Yun Yang sat down on the steps, dejected. Right then, Sun A came knocking on the door. She was heartbroken and needed Yun Yang's comfort. The two girls hugged each other and sobbed. Jiang A's death cast a dark, suffocating shadow over the family's atmosphere. The mother worked tirelessly around the house, constantly muttering something under her breath, and accidentally cut her wrist on a piece of porcelain. Yun Yang couldn't stand seeing her family suffering like this. Worried about her grandmother's situation, Yun Yang knocked on the door and asked He Jun if he remembered when her grandmother died. All she knew was that her grandmother had passed away before she was born, but the time and cause of death were unclear. Yun Yang wondered if it was related to her aunt's sudden death. Yun Yang stood outside the door, crying her heart out. She didn't want to just give up and end it all like this. Her aunt was already gone, but she at least had to save her grandmother. The woman who had lost her daughter sat in the living room, numb, watching the news report about her daughter's death on TV. Then she switched channels to the Miss Korea pageant, the moments of her daughter happily spending time with the family, still vivid in her memory. Although Jiang A wasn't interested in studying and only wanted to become Miss Korea, she was still a good daughter. She always chattered in her ear, saying that when she made money, she would buy her mom the mink coat she'd always dreamed of. The woman deeply regretted not hugging her daughter more, and she got up and left the house in despair. Sun A came out of the room, but couldn't find her mother anywhere. The whole family worried that she might do something drastic, so they rushed out to look for her. Yun Yang heard her mom's voice, and before she could even react, He Jun burst out of the room and ran straight toward somewhere. The woman was standing on a cliff, about to jump, but luckily He Jun showed up in time, convincing her that she had to be strong and face the truth. Even if now she wanted to leave in pain, she should think about her two remaining children. Did she want to leave them to live with the trauma of losing their mother for the rest of their lives? Thinking about her children, the woman finally relented and gave up the idea of seeking death. The whole family hugged each other, sobbing, and He Jun also breathed a sigh of relief. Yun Yang was very grateful for He Jun's actions, and for a moment, she didn't know how to thank him. He Jun understood what Yun Yang was thinking and suggested they hug. So many bad things had happened lately, they could consider it comforting each other. Before He Jun could even finish, Yun Yang had already rushed over and hugged him tightly. He Jun gently patted Yun Yang's back to comfort her. He'd been thinking. He couldn't let the killer go after a third victim, and he didn't want to end his partnership with Yun Yang and just become strangers like that. While Yun Yang was talking, He Jun expertly took the Rubik's Cube, gently twisted it a few times, and solved the puzzle just like that. Yun Yang watched, her eyes wide with amazement. The two started to piece together the clues. Judging from the current situation, Min Soo couldn't have tied anyone up because of his injured hand, so they could rule him out. The next person was Byom Ryong. The reason he panicked was that he was worried the police would find out he didn't report a communist. After ruling out the two suspects, the remaining one was Yun Yang's dad, Baek Hui. Jun suddenly mentioned Mi-suk. She was also very suspicious. It seemed like Mi-suk was very happy to hear the news that her brother was thrown in jail. How did she know the details of the murders so well? Then write them into a novel and get it published. Jun looked at his watch. In half an hour, Baek-hui would be arrested by the police as the first suspect. The two of them went to his house to look for clues. Baek-hui unconsciously stepped back, standing in front of a cabinet. Jun immediately sensed something was off and went to check the cabinet. Sure enough, he found a piece of cloth with blood on it. Baek-hui panicked and snatched it back. Remembering his meeting with Mi-suk 2 hours earlier, Mi-suk wanted to make a deal with him. She took out a blue hat from her bag. This was the hat that Baek-hui himself had thrown into the trash a few days ago. Mi-suk had happened to see this. She frankly pointed out that Baek-hui was trying to protect someone, and she wanted to get away from someone. The two of them could just team up and help each other out. Mi-suk mentioned Baek-hui's name. Baek-hui got scared, then obediently moved closer to listen to her plan. Back to the present, Baek-hui admitted this thing was his, and he did it all. Yun-yang was shocked, frozen in place. Did she travel back in time just to hear her dad confess to his crimes? Yun-yang didn't get it. How did everything turn out like this, from beginning to end? Suddenly, Baek-hui started hallucinating, hearing a woman's voice echoing in his ears. Sensing things were going south, Jun rushed over to calm Baek-hui down, convincing him to think carefully. This was related to his family's future. If he was just lying to cover for someone, the consequences would be unpredictable. Surprisingly, Baek-hui still stuck to his original answer. Yun-yang was completely devastated. Since he insisted that he was the one who did it all, then he should just accept the punishment of the law that he deserved. Just as Yun-yang was about to leave, Dong-sik suddenly appeared at the door. He had heard the whole conversation between them. As an uncle and a police officer, he had no choice but to carry out his duty and take Baek-hui to the station. On the way back home, Yun-yang sat helplessly by the roadside, sobbing, constantly saying, "I'm sorry," like a confession to the unfortunate victims. It was all because of her dad. Jun couldn't hold it in any longer and cut her off. He didn't believe Baek-hui was the killer. As expected, Jun's guess was right. Baek-hui hastily admitted guilt. From Uncle Dong-sik's mouth, he learned that the blood-stained shirt was connected to the murder case. Baek-hui was shocked after hearing this, his eyes wide. The first time Dong-sik saw the piece of paper in the matchbox, he also suspected Baek-hui was the killer, because he had seen that Baek-hui's room was full of matchboxes from the Bong Bong tea house. After hearing this, Baek-hui suddenly seemed to come to his senses and immediately denied killing anyone. However, he still couldn't explain the blood-stained shirt clearly, so he was temporarily taken to the station for questioning. Jun was talking to Yun-yang outside the door when he saw her grandfather lose control and rush out, yelling that he wanted to take the killer's life. Right then, Sun-ae appeared, providing an alibi for Baek-hui. Last night, Baek-hui had saved her from almost being forced into a hotel by Byung-ryong. Because he was worried, he went to her house in the middle of the night to check on her again. At that time, Jong-ae was about to go out, and they talked for a couple of minutes at the gate. After that, they both went up to the rooftop. Baek-hui had wanted to wait for Jong-ae to come back before leaving, but waited all night, and she never returned. Just this simple statement from Sun-ae could prove that Baek-hui wasn't the killer. The father, with a serious face, warned his daughter not to tell anyone about this. After Jong-ae's death, rumors were everywhere in the village, saying that his daughter had gotten drunk and ran to an abandoned house to meet up with a strange man. Before leaving, Sun-ae told Jun that on the night of the murder, her sister had a date with someone. She said that the person was the benefactor who had saved her life that morning. The two immediately rushed off to find Baek-yu. From a neighbor, they learned that Baek-yu was studying at Seoul National University, majoring in Korean literature. Lee-ju was an alumnus of Seoul National University, also having majored in Korean literature. They were in the same department at the same university. Jun remembered the lock-shaped necklace found at the crime scene, matching the one worn by Baek-hui. Dong-sik recognized it as Baek-yu's necklace, but Baek-hui denied it, firmly claiming it was his. Yun-yang saw the picture of the necklace and was sure it belonged to her uncle. He never let anyone touch it. Jun recalled that the blood-stained shirt, when taken to the forensic department that year, the police officer, while driving and drinking coffee, had an accident, and the coffee spilled all over the shirt. Back then, science and technology weren't advanced. The evidence was contaminated, and they couldn't extract any useful clues from it. This time, before setting off, Jun decided to knock on the police car door, took the officer's coffee cup, dumped it out, then handed him a bag, and watched as the shirt was safely put into the bag before breathing a sigh of relief. The news of Baek Hui's arrest quickly spread throughout the school. Mi Suk heard people talking, constantly muttering and scolding Baek Hui under her breath, calling him an idiot for making everything more complicated. Yun Yong and Sun A were both suspended from school and sent home. So A was locked in her room by her father to prevent her from going to the police station to testify for Baek Hui. Sun A banged on the door, yelling in vain, then took a risk and jumped out the window to escape. Yun Yong had been guarding the door early on to prevent her from doing so. Yun Yong believed that Baek Hui actively took the blame to cover for the criminal, and what he was going through now was his own doing. Sun A sank to the ground, crying and begging Yun Yong. She remembered the night the two of them were on the rooftop. Baek Hui had confessed his feelings to her, but this love scared him. From childhood to adulthood, Baek Hui had lost the people he loved. His parents and brother all left him one by one, and now he was also very afraid of losing the person he cared about once again. Sun A calmly and gently comforted him. Baek Hui was deeply moved and couldn't help but give her a sweet kiss. Hearing her mother's confession, Yun Yong still didn't soften her heart until her grandfather appeared and pulled her away. Yun Yong remembered that time when her mother had to go to the emergency room, and her father was busy taking care of her uncle and was nowhere to be seen all day. Her mother and she could never compare to her uncle in his heart. Yun Yong sat dejectedly at the bus stop, waiting for Hae-jun to return. This time, Hae-jun went to Seoul to ask about Baek Hui's whereabouts, but most of his friends wouldn't say a word as if they were afraid of something. Only a few were willing to speak out. At the same time, the police station also received the blood analysis report from the shirt. It was type A, not belonging to either of the two victims. Baek Hui, who was blood type O, was also successfully ruled out. While the police were still confused, agents from the security department suddenly showed up, didn't say much, and immediately took Baek Hui away, wanting to get Baek Hui's whereabouts out of him. This scene was seen by Hae-jun and Yun Yong, who were standing not far away. Hae-jun quickly told Yun Yong to stay put and wait for him, then ran like the wind, chasing after the car. Yun Yong was worried sick, immediately racking her brain, searching for memories of her father and uncle. Suddenly, she remembered one time when she carried her father's luggage to her uncle's house, scolding him for only caring about his brother and not even glancing at her and her mother. Yun Yong immediately guessed his hiding place. Sure enough, an injured Baek Hui was hiding there. Baek Hui was extremely worried when he found out his brother had taken the blame for him. After all, that blood-soaked shirt was his, but he didn't kill anyone. Baek Hui endured the pain and begged Yun Yong to take him to see his brother. Unexpectedly, as soon as they stepped out the door, they ran right into Hae-jun. The three of them went to the front door of the inn. Fearing danger, Hae-jun and Baek Hui went upstairs to rescue the person first. Yun Yong waited downstairs. At this time, inside the inn, Baek Hui was being tortured to within an inch of his life, but he still gritted his teeth and didn't say a word. Seeing Baek Hui so stubborn, the ruthless group grabbed his head and pushed it underwater. In a daze, Baek Hui seemed to fall into a memory. A few days ago, he found his injured brother lying outside the door. He guessed that the other guy must have gone to a protest march again. Facing his brother, who kept apologizing, Baek Hui trembled with anger, directly snatched the key-shaped necklace from his neck, and questioned his brother. Had he forgotten all the words that their parents had said? 7 years ago, Baek Hui's parents learned from a neighbor that their eldest son had participated in a protest near the school and had apparently been shot. It was unclear if he was alive or dead. The parents quickly locked the two brothers, Baek Hui and Baek Yu, in the house, carefully instructing them that if anything happened to them, they must take care of each other and try to live well. After saying this, they turned and left. Unexpectedly, the next second, a gunshot suddenly rang out from outside. Their parents had been brutally harmed. Before passing away, the mother still held tightly to the key to her children's room. Baek Yu couldn't bear to let his parents die in vain like that. The fire of hatred always burned in his chest, so he disregarded his promise to his parents and continued to participate in protest marches. Baek Hui woke up from his daze. His mother's words, that the two brothers must take good care of each other, kept echoing in his ears. Tears fell like rain. Yun Yong waited downstairs for a long time and saw her dad, covered in blood, limping step by step out of the inn. And the memories of him seemed to merge with reality. Yun Yong cried heartbrokenly, understanding his unspeakable secret all this time. She rushed over to check his injuries. Baek Hui's voice was choked up. He didn't know what mistake he had made to encounter such tragic things. After saying this, he cried his heart out. In the darkest moment of her father's life, his daughter was so late to appear and didn't know how to respond to these heartbreaking questions. Yun Yong carefully took care of her injured father, The two of them waited anxiously in front of the inn for Baekyu and Hae-jun to return. Because Baekyu showed up in time, the security department agents agreed to let Baekhui go. Before leaving, Hae-jun gave Baekyu his watch, telling him he absolutely had to hold out for 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, a TV station interview van arrived in front of the inn. A group of reporters rushed upstairs. The security agents received an urgent order to retreat and had no choice but to let Baekyu go. Unexpectedly, as soon as they stepped outside, they were chased and blocked by the reporters. Hae-jun took the opportunity to rush into the room and carry Baekyu out on his back. Baekhui and Baekyu were safely taken to the hospital. Yun-young wanted to treat Hae-jun to dinner as a thank you, but since she didn't have any money from this era, Hae-jun was the one who paid in advance. The two happily agreed to go to a restaurant the next day. Arriving back home, they met the car mechanic Hae-jun had mentioned before, who was also his future father, Yan-yu. Yan-yu laid out his conditions with an arrogant look. Hae-jun had to prepare food for him every night. Except for dinner, he didn't need to bother him at other times. Of course, Hae-jun still had to solve the Rubik's Cube in 5 seconds, right in front of him first. Without a word, Hae-jun twisted it a few times, and in less than 5 seconds, he successfully tossed it back to him. Opening the hood and briefly explaining about the car, Hae-jun told Yan-yu not to tell anyone else what he had seen there. The time machine officially entered the repair phase, and the last remaining victim in the serial murder case was the ringleader of the school's bullying trio, Kim Hae. The fact that Kim Hae became a victim was mentioned in Mi-suk's novel manuscript. Turns out, Kim Hae liked Mi-suk, and Mi-suk was well aware of those feelings. The trio and Mi-suk gathered at the Bong Bong tea house. One of the girls in the group brought some trendy pink ribbons. Kim Hae first scoffed at them as tacky, but when she saw that Mi-suk looked cute wearing a pink ribbon, she quickly grabbed the last one and stuffed it into her backpack. The owner of the Bong Bong tea house, Chung-ae, also passed by and snagged one for herself. Based on the novel's content, Yoon-young guessed that maybe Kim Hae knew some secret of Mi-suk's, which made her feel uneasy. Finding her annoying, she threatened Mi-suk to go to Seoul with her, otherwise, the secret would be exposed. And this secret could be that Mi-suk was the real killer. Hae-jun also thought that was highly likely. Actually, he knew why Kim Hae ran away from home. The homeroom teacher liked Kim Hae's mom and often went to her restaurant to support her. One time, he witnessed Kim Hae's mom being harassed by a drunk guy. The teacher, without a word, rushed over and taught him a lesson. The ironic part was that the person being beaten was the parent of another student. Kim Hae also witnessed her mom tenderly applying medicine to the teacher. Because of this incident, her mom even prepared a kimchi soup that wasn't on the menu for him. But Kim Hae didn't know that, for her daughter's sake, she had begged the teacher not to disturb their lives anymore, and quietly withdrew her budding feelings. But there are always some people who like to gossip. The female student of the parent who got beaten badmouthed Kim Hae's mom to the other classmates, saying that she was seducing men everywhere. Even the homeroom teacher was charmed. Kim Hae walked into the classroom and happened to overhear everything. Her blood rushed to her head, and she raised her fist, ready to throw down. Luckily, the homeroom teacher arrived in time to stop it, or else there might have been a murder right then and there. Kim Hae was agitated and directly called out to the teacher in the middle of class. The teacher gave her a painful slap in response. When Hae-jun arrived, Kim Hae had already packed her bag and was ready to leave. Kim Hae returned to the shop. Her mom wasn't there, but on the stove was the kimchi soup that the homeroom teacher loved. Kim Hae was extremely upset, thinking that her mom had chosen to be with the teacher. So she just packed her bag and left home without a word. To protect Kim Hae, Hae-jun was determined to nip her escape plan in the bud, telling her to leave a note for her mom before running away. Then, Hae-jun repeatedly read the note he wrote himself to her. Kim Hae couldn't take it anymore and told Hae-jun to stop. But Hae-jun turned it back on her, saying that if she ran away, her mom would have to hear those hurtful and heartbreaking words over and over again for the rest of her life, suffering 100,000 times more than her. Hearing this, Kim Hae fell into deep thought, and the idea of running away gradually faded. But since she was already out, Hae-jun took this opportunity to take Kim Hae to Seoul to unwind and relax. The two of them went to an ancient tree that was over 300 years old. The ancient tree had stood firm for over 300 years, enduring countless droughts and floods, always standing tall, just like a mother who persistently searched for her missing daughter for 40 long years. In the future, on the road Hae-jun took every time he came home from work, he would see Kim Hae's mom handing out missing person flyers day after day. 4 seasons a year, she never stopped. Just like that, year after year, Kim Hae's age also increased on the missing person flyers. One time, when Hae-jun was again passing by that place, he saw her fall to the ground and rushed over to help her up. Just like that, he learned about her arduous journey of searching over the years. She never stopped looking for her daughter, always believing that her daughter was still alive. But just because she hated her, she wouldn't show up. She persisted for 40 long years, until she died. Still unable to see her daughter again, Hae-jun advised Kim Hae not to be in such a hurry to run away from home. Wait until she's 20, and she'll naturally be able to leave home to go to college, date, and work. By the time she returns, her mom will be old. The hatred of today, when we look back, will all just be sorrow. After being talked through things, Kim Hae felt relieved and didn't hate her mom anymore. At the same time, Yeon-yong went to find Sun-ae, who was locked up at home, and told her the good news that Baek-hui had been found innocent and released, even taking her to the hospital to visit him. Sun-ae asked him why he didn't tell the story about them being together that night. If he had, he wouldn't have been arrested by the police, and wouldn't have been injured like this. Unexpectedly, Baek-hui just grinned after hearing this. He didn't want the person he loved to be attacked by gossip and rumors. Hearing this, Sun-ae suddenly covered her face and sobbed in his arms. Hae-jun brought Kim Hae back, safely. Arriving home, her mother had already cooked seaweed soup, waiting for her daughter. Kim Hae asked her mom why she had made kimchi soup that morning. Her mom didn't hide anything, explaining that it was the last meal to say goodbye to the homeroom teacher. From now on, he wouldn't disturb their lives anymore. Kim Hae was deeply moved. She had accepted her mom and the teacher being together. Seeing the heartwarming image of the mother and daughter, Hae-jun's anxious heart finally relaxed, and he happily went back to have dinner with Yeon-yong. Before, Yeon-yong never understood why her mom was always so nice to her annoying dad. Only today did she understand that the two of them had been in the darkest times of their lives, coming together and comforting each other. Before she knew it, Yeon-yong had drunk herself silly, even wanting to go to the river to play in the water, and begging Hae-jun to join her. Seeing Hae-jun still standing there, Yeon-yong pouted and went to him to beg. Who knew, the next second, she had fallen asleep in his arms. Hae-jun had no choice but to carry her home. After dealing with the drunk Yeon-yong, it was almost 10 o'clock, and Hae-jun hurriedly brought dinner to Yeon-yu. Yeon-yu was engrossed in fixing the car when he was interrupted. He looked at the time and immediately froze. Tonight, he had a date with his crush to go to the movies. He didn't even have time to take a bite of the sandwich before hurriedly packing up and leaving. Hae-jun remembered that he had previously discovered his mom and dad's secret collection of movie tickets. Thinking that today was the first day they went to the movies together, Hae-jun's heart was pounding like it was about to jump out of his chest because he had never met his mom, from childhood to adulthood. So he secretly followed his dad. Seeing the back of the girl sitting next to his dad from behind, and she was even wearing a pink ribbon just like Mi-suk's, Hae-jun got a huge fright, remembering what his grandfather had said, that his cruel mother had left the night he was born, not even hugging her son once. She even considered him a stain on her life. The movie ended, and Hae-jun saw a girl in a long dress with a pretty pink ribbon come out. Wasn't this the owner of the Bong Bong Tea House, Chung-ae? Hae-jun was shocked speechless. But right at this moment, Mi-suk, wearing the same pink ribbon, walked out of the movie theater and greeted Hae-jun. Hae-jun looked back and forth between the two girls in front of him, momentarily a bit confused. While he was dazed, a couple passing by bumped into him, and popcorn and soda spilled everywhere. This couple not only didn't apologize, but also had a rude attitude. Tea house owner Chung-ae saw this and immediately went up, seeing injustice and stepping in to help. A moment later, Yeon-yu also ran over, standing up to protect his girlfriend, who was arguing with the other people. Only then did Hae-jun realize that his real mother was the tea house owner, Chung-ae. He remembered his grandfather's words, that his mom had coldly left right after giving birth to him, not even hugging her son once. Hae-jun just stared at his mom. Chung-ae didn't know why she felt an indescribable sadness welling up inside her. Hearing his girlfriend say that, Yeon-yu also nodded in agreement. Because the first time he met Hae-jun, his mood was also a bit complicated, like there was some kind of unexplainable emotion between them. But for Hae-jun, he didn't feel joy in meeting his mom, because he had disliked that woman when he first set foot in the Bong Bong Tea House. In this conservative era, the owner Chung-ae was overly enthusiastic. The first time they met, she kept trying to feed Hae-jun, making him extremely uncomfortable. And maybe it was because of that free-spirited personality that she chose to abandon her son. Hae-jun was in a bad mood, but the most important thing now was to find the serial killer. He temporarily suppressed his emotions and went to see Baek-yu to investigate. Both victims had close relationships with Baek-yu. Turns out, teacher Lee and Baekyu were a couple. Lee Ju came to this village because she wanted to leave with him. After holding the memorial service for his parents, they would leave this place together. And the house where Lee Ju was hiding was the abandoned house where Jiang A's body was found. The day the two of them lost track of her, Jiang A secretly followed Baekyu and discovered the relationship between teacher Lee and him. Jiang A, being kind, wanted to do something to help the two of them, so she went to the abandoned house alone in the middle of the night, even bringing a book with her. Who would have thought she would end up being brutally harmed? At this moment, Hae-jun suddenly remembered that inside the matchbox, the killer left at each crime scene, there was a piece of paper with a message. Women who read books are dangerous. He thought this was a warning. Right then, Yan Yu, who was fixing the car, hurriedly knocked on the door, wanting to borrow the bathroom. The two of them quickly gathered up the case files on the table, preventing him from seeing them, but they carelessly left behind a matchbox. That night, Sun-A sat remembering her lost sister. Every memory just came flooding back to her mind. The two of them had once happily imagined that if she could become a novelist, she would write her sister's name in the book. A person's life might luckily last 100 years, but books are eternal. In other words, Jiang A would be remembered by people forever and ever. The moment of happily teasing her late sister flooded back, making Sun-A feel unbearable pain and sorrow. She hastily searched for the notebook to fulfill that last wish, but it had vanished into thin air. The next day, when Yun Yang went to class, she heard everyone excitedly discussing Mai Suk, who had become a shining star by suddenly publishing a novel at the age of 19, praised as a genius. Sun-A read it and discovered it was the same as what she had written. To put it bluntly, this was blatant theft. Sun-A was shaking with anger. Sun-A went to find Mi-suk to demand justice. She accused the other girl of daring to steal her manuscript and publish it under her name. She definitely wouldn't let it go. She wanted to tell everyone. Mi-suk wasn't fazed at all. She knew Sun-A had no proof, even confidently threatening that if she dared to say another word, her ending would be the same as her unfortunate sister's. Hearing these blatant threats, Sun-A was indeed shaken. Now she had no proof in her hands, and the only person who saw her write, her sister, had also passed away. She didn't even have a tiny glimmer of hope of winning. Moreover, once the matter came to light, her parents would only hate her even more. They weren't proud to have a daughter who liked to write. Yun Yang finally understood why her mom had given up on speaking the truth back then. She encouraged her mom to cheer up. In this world, there were still readers who considered her family, loved her novels, loved and supported her in pursuing her dream, hoping she could become a real novelist. Don't let anything hinder that dream. Yun Yang even asked her dad to help convince Sun-A. Baekhui sincerely told Sun-A that when you do something, you have to be determined to the end. That novel was hers, so she had to protect it at all costs. Don't forget that he will always be behind her, supporting her unconditionally. Sun-A's mother found out and even hit her in anger, saying, why would she think she wasn't proud of her? She deeply regretted not being able to support Jiang A in pursuing her dream before. So now she would give her all the encouragement. Not stopping there, her usually gruff father even personally drove her to school, making Sun-A not believe her eyes. Sun-A and Yun Yang went hand in hand to meet the publisher, and Mi-suk and her mother to get to the bottom of it. Mi-suk knew Sun-A had no proof. Full of confidence, she bit back, accusing her of making a scene for no reason. But a notebook can contain a whole novel? It has to be a thick stack like this. In it were all the crossed out lines to choose the most appropriate words, and she could answer any question at all because she was the real author. The editor quietly picked up the manuscript and read it. After some study, he decided to recall all the published books and would republish them when the work was completed. Sun-A successfully got her novel back. At the same time, she asked the publisher to add a very special line for her, which was dedicated to Jiang A, as a way to keep her promise to her late sister. Yun Yang also learned another little secret. The letter addressed to Yi at the beginning of the novel Sun-A wrote was the initials she wanted to name her daughter in the future. Or other words, Yun Yang's name. Mi-suk was enduring her mother's wrath, who was utterly humiliated by her deceitful and useless daughter. She considered her a disgrace. Mi-suk wandered the streets alone, numb. To get revenge on her cruel mother, she called out her drunk brother. When Mi-suk was 13, her brother broke into her room and abused her. Her mother, all these years, even though she witnessed it, pretended not to know anything and walked away. Even afterward, the frequency increased, and even though she screamed that she was in pain, it seemed like no one cared. Seeing his mother's indifferent attitude, Min-soo was further emboldened. Now Mi-suk couldn't take it anymore. She went to the police station to find Dong-sik, saying she knew who the killer was. It was her brother Min Soo, and she was the witness. At the same time, Yeon Yu came looking for Hae-jun. Earlier, he had accidentally picked up a matchbox when he borrowed the bathroom. He questioned Hae-jun. Why were the matchbox and the piece of paper had appeared at the crime scene at Hae-jun's house? Could it be that he was the killer? Faced with Yeon Yu's questioning, Hae-jun didn't directly answer. Naturally, he knew Yeon Yu believed he wasn't the killer. That's why he came here to seek answers instead of going to the police station to report him. Hae-jun swore that he wasn't the killer. As for his true identity, it would be revealed after the car was fixed. With great difficulty, he saw Yeon Yu off, and Hae-jun tiredly sat down on the steps. Seeing this, Yeon gently came over to comfort him. At the same time, she also learned from him that Yeon Yu misunderstood and suspected him of being the killer. Knowing Hae-jun's mood was troubled, Yeon suggested they take a walk by the river to clear their heads. More than anyone, she understood the feeling of facing family members, and he didn't even know how difficult it would be. The reason his dad helped him hide the matter about the matchbox and didn't contact the police might be due to a feeling that was both strange and familiar towards Hae-jun. A strange feeling that made him choose to trust him without hesitation. Just like the principal, even though he didn't know he was his grandson, he was later inexplicably especially kind to him. Hae-jun confided that his grandfather was the only person who lived with him, but didn't care about him at all. From childhood to adulthood, he always treated him like a stranger. His dad also fell apart after his mom left home and went to America by herself. The two of them, father and son, only met briefly once or twice a year. So, even with time travel, the so-called family bond between them didn't exist. Yeon suddenly felt heartbroken for him, having to go through the most painful time with loneliness when no one loved him. The two hugged each other tightly, enjoying the brief, sweet moment of happiness. At the same time, following Mi-suk's accusation, the police arrived and apprehended Min Soo. Taking him to the station, they frantically ransacked the room and discovered a red string, along with some empty matchboxes. Although the witness and physical evidence were complete, Dong-sik still had some doubts because there were no pieces of paper in those matchboxes, and the handwriting in Min Soo's notebook was completely different from the writing left at the scene. Dong-sik suspected that the real killer was someone else, but his superiors, wanting to quickly take credit for solving the case, turned a blind eye to his doubts. The news of Min Soo's arrest quickly reached Hae-jun. Time was of the essence. They had to speed up the investigation to clear this injustice. Hae-jun suddenly remembered that before the murders happened, Min Soo had accidentally fallen and broken his hand. Since then, he had seemingly vanished into thin air, only to reappear suddenly after he recovered and be secretly framed by Mi-suk. Hae-jun believed that Mi-suk alone definitely couldn't have devised such a meticulous plan. It was very likely that someone was behind the scenes, secretly helping her. Hae-jun wanted to ask Kim Hae for some information, since she was the only witness who actually saw the killer on the night of the crime. He deliberately loitered around her, looking for an opportunity to talk. But Kim Hae rudely turned away without a word. Sun-ae and Baek-hui sweetly walked hand in hand back home. The two of them were laughing and joking in front of the door when they were coincidentally seen by Sun-ae's mother. She quietly listened to their conversation. Sun-ae was very worried about her mom being home alone. Ever since her sister passed away, she would take everything out to clean whenever she felt distressed, and she herself didn't know how to help. After saying this, the two hugged goodbye. The mother, hearing her daughter's heartwarming words, was also very touched and made her her favorite dish. That night, Kim Hae, feeling restless, finally took the initiative to find Hae-jun, revealing everything that happened that night. That night, when she was crossing the bridge, she saw an injured Min Soo who had fallen below. Min Soo asked her to call his younger sister, Mi-suk, to come and get him. Kim Hae also quickly contacted Mi-suk. Who would have thought that when they arrived, they would accidentally witness the scene of the killer harming teacher Lee? Kim Hae couldn't see his face clearly, but Mi-suk could. She wouldn't let Kim Hae call the police. She wanted to take this opportunity to pin the blame on her brother, make him the real killer, and escape from his beatings and torture over the years. After saying this, Mi-suk took off her shirt to show Kim Hae the wounds on her body. Kim Hae was shocked, speechless, and heartbroken to see the person she cared about suffering like this, so she decided to help her cover this up. But Kim Hae was still worried. If the real killer was caught, Mi-suk would be punished for giving false testimony. Mi-suk calmly replied that the killer would never be caught. Hae-jun, upon hearing the truth about that night, went home and told Yoon-young. The killer was a man, and Mi-suk was the only witness who saw his face. Just then, the phone on the table suddenly rang. On the other end of the line was Beom-ryong. trembling as he reported that Sun-A seemed to be in danger. It turned out that this afternoon, Byom-ryong went alone to the back of the mountain and met Sun-A, who was worshipping at her sister's grave. Seeing Byom-ryong, Sun-A was extremely frightened, probably because of his dirty intentions from before. Byom-ryong hurriedly left to avoid being suspected, but when he returned, Sun-A had vanished without a trace. On the ground was only a matchbox. Byom-ryong panicked and called the police, but the police said the killer had already been caught, so they didn't pay attention. He had no choice but to call Hae-jun. Hae-jun asked Byom-ryong to stay put and asked Yun-yong to find Bae-kwi to inform Officer Dong-sik. He went to find Byom-ryong. At this moment, in the abandoned house, Sun-A's hands were tied with a red cord, and next to the plastic bag over her head was her novel. The killer carefully tore off a piece of paper and stuffed it into a matchbox, put it in Sun-A's pocket, and then prepared to kill. At the critical moment, Byom-ryong suddenly found his way here and went straight to hit the killer a few times. He quickly woke up Sun-A, intending to take her away from there, but as soon as they stepped out the door, they were stopped by the killer. Sun-A, terrified, used all her remaining strength to run away, the sounds of the killer's blows still echoing behind her. Tears kept falling, but she didn't stop. After dealing with Byom-ryong, the killer quickly gave chase. No matter how hard she tried to run, Sun-A couldn't escape his sight. Luckily, Hae-jun appeared just in time, and the killer immediately hid. At the same time, the police arrived, so Hae-jun went all out chasing the killer. No matter how hard he tried, Hae-jun lost him. And when he arrived at the abandoned house and curiously went inside, he discovered Byom-ryong lying in a pool of blood. He rushed over to check, but it was too late. He had already stopped breathing. While Hae-jun was in a daze, Dong-sik also arrived, with his hands covered in blood and the familiar matchbox. And note at the scene, there was no reason for Dong-sik not to suspect him. Hae-jun was immediately arrested for murder. The situation was suspicious, so he couldn't explain anything further. He just quietly let him handcuff him and take him to the station in front of a helpless Yun-yong. Dong-sik had determined that Hae-jun was the killer, regardless of how he refuted it. Dong-sik thought he was just making excuses. Hae-jun calmly responded that the handwriting on the paper stuffed in the matchbox, just a simple handwriting analysis, would prove whether or not he was the killer. This was the simplest and most direct way to prove it. But Dong-sik was still suspicious. Why did Hae-jun have a matchbox from the Bong Bong tea house? Along with that note, Hae-jun said he found it. Dong-sik angrily slammed the table. Feeling like he was being played for a fool, Hae-jun understood that the current situation was unfavorable to him. Everything was a mess, but there were also many ways to clear his name. The police could compare the handwriting, and they could also wait for Sun-A to wake up and take her statement to understand the whole story. On this side, Sun-A, injured, was taken to the hospital. In her pocket, they found a matchbox from the Bong Bong tea house, along with a note with the content, "Women who read books are dangerous." Yun-yong went to the hospital to visit her mom, and coincidentally heard the police reporting this news to the station. Hae-jun had said that Mi-suk wasn't the killer, but was the only witness who knew what he looked like. The real killer was a man. Yun-yong immediately went to confront Mi-suk, not wasting words, going straight to the point, asking her who the killer was, and telling her the seriousness of the matter. This time's victim was also their classmate. If Byom-ryong hadn't shown up in time, the one who died would be Sun-A. Mi-suk put on an innocent face, saying she didn't know anything. Seeing her indifferent attitude as if nothing had happened, Yun-yong angrily revealed the truth that Hae-jun had been arrested by the police and that he would very likely take all the blame. Hearing that teacher Hae-jun had been arrested, Mi-suk finally wavered a bit. But under Yun-yong's constant pleas, she immediately recovered her cold, indifferent demeanor and pushed Yun-yong away. Yun-yong sadly returned to the hospital. She sat by the bedside, holding Sun-A's hand tightly, praying for her mom to wake up soon, tears of sorrow constantly falling. Bae-kwi stayed all night outside the hospital room, his face also wet with tears. Sun-A's parents noticed him, realizing he was the young man who had spent the night with their daughter on the rooftop that day. Seeing that Bae-kwi was tired and hadn't eaten anything, the couple took him to a roadside eatery. But Bae-kwi had no appetite, his heart constantly thinking about the woman he loved. Still lying in the hospital bed, having gone through such terrible things, he couldn't help but curse the killer, vowing to catch him and make him pay. The father, hearing this, also got emotional, with tears welling up in his eyes. "So, you should eat more, right? What kind of man is so skinny?" Then he demonstrated himself, eating a huge bite of noodles. Bae-kwi quickly followed his future father-in-law's example. starting to eat his noodles with his head down. At the police station, Dong-sik investigated Hae-jun's information and found that his ID, resume, and teacher certificate were all fake. Not only that, Dong-sik had searched all the information Hae-jun had left behind and found that there was no evidence proving Hae-jun belonged to this era. Dong-sik threatened him to confess to get leniency, otherwise, both he and Yun-yang would be arrested as spies. Finally, Hae-jun had no choice but to tell the truth that he traveled through time. He told Dong-sik to call Principal Jun to his house right now. He himself would give them a reasonable explanation. Hae-jun took them both to his workroom. Inside, it was filled with files on the serial murder case. Principal Jun saw a newspaper from 1988. They were clearly in 1987, right? Dong-sik also flipped through the documents on the table and found a report written in his own handwriting. What the hell was going on? At this point, Hae-jun solemnly declared that he thought they would only believe it if they saw it with their own eyes. The truth that he came from the future. He was Principal Jun's grandson, and Yun-yang was a relative of Dong-sik's. Principal Jun suddenly noticed the watch Hae-jun was wearing. It was exactly like the one he had bought this morning to give to his future grandson. Principal Jun carefully examined it, seeing the engraved words on the watch. He immediately believed that Hae-jun was his future grandson. He calmly explained to Dong-sik that he had personally bought this watch this morning for his future grandson. But Hae-jun had been arrested by Dong-sik since last night. Following the timeline, Hae-jun basically had no chance to steal the watch. Moreover, the blood connection was undeniable. Every time the principal saw Hae-jun, he felt a strange sense of familiarity and closeness. While the two were talking excitedly, Yun-yang suddenly returned from outside. She didn't say a word and immediately ran to hug Hae-jun tightly, thanking him for returning safely. She didn't even notice the principal and Dong-sik standing downstairs, staring at the two of them. It turned out that not long ago, Sun-ae had woken up and been questioned by the police. Although she didn't see the killer's face, she successfully helped clear Hae-jun of the charges. She said that Teacher Jun was the one who came to her rescue, not the actual killer. Hae-jun was officially released, but Dong-sik still refused to believe what he said. But he was just saying that. As soon as he went outside, he immediately turned to ask Yun-yang who his nephew Baekhui would marry in the future. Yun-yang also honestly answered that it was Sun-ae. Dong-sik's face lit up with a smile, while Hae-jun stood there looking at him with an expression full of contempt. From then on, Dong-sik started to follow Hae-jun closely for several days. Hae-jun always tried to show the truth that he was from the future. From revealing the news article about the highway construction that would appear on the front page, which roads were being repaired or renovated, to the results of the matches on TV. Everything was accurate to a T. Dong-sik was shocked, his mouth agape. Even though he was still stubborn on the outside, he had already begun to believe that what Hae-jun said was true. Seeing that the other man was starting to believe him, Hae-jun immediately suggested they join forces. The killer was currently at large, and to make him face the appropriate punishment, it had to be a police officer like Dong-sik who caught him. Because Hae-jun didn't belong to this era, even if he caught the killer, he couldn't do anything. Dong-sik finally nodded in agreement. So, Hae-jun gave all the documents he had collected about the massacre to Dong-sik. My-suk had lied and framed her brother, and she was the only one who saw the killer's face. Therefore, the breakthrough in this case lay with My-suk. Dong-sik intended to find My-suk's father to ask for some information. Who knew that as soon as he stepped out the door, he would run into Principal Jun. This time, he had come specifically to talk to Hae-jun. Ever since he found out that Hae-jun was his future grandson, Principal Jun couldn't hide his curiosity and wanted to have a drink with his grandson. Facing his warm and enthusiastic grandfather, Hae-jun felt incredibly conflicted, because in his memory, his grandfather always had a cold and unapproachable demeanor, completely unaware of the changes the future would bring. Principal Jun was currently absorbed in expressing his love for his grandson. The words he engraved on the watch, "Time passes, but love remains," were meant to convey his eternal love for his grandson. It wasn't long before Principal Jun was completely drunk, and Hae-jun had no choice but to take him home. After settling his grandfather in, on his way back, he passed by the Bong Bong Tea House. Hae-jun paused for a moment, and then stepped inside. By the time he came to his senses and turned to leave, the tea house owner, Chung-ae, called out to him. Chung-ae wanted to offer him a cup of tea. Ever since their last farewell at the movie theater, she had never been able to forget the way Hae-jun looked at her that day. Chung-ae asked him why he had looked at her like that, only to then ignore her as if she were invisible. Hae-jun didn't answer. At a loss, Chung-ae simply said that she was leaving the village. She hadn't told her boyfriend, but now, facing Hae-jun, She blurted it out, as if fate had meant for him to know. Hae-jun desperately wanted to know why his mother left the village, but Chung-ae only gave him a cryptic reply. If he wanted to know, he should have tried to get to know her sooner. Now it's too late. Dejected, Hae-jun left the tea house and sought out Yeon-yu, asking if anything was wrong between him and his girlfriend lately. Yeon-yu said their relationship was fine. Hae-jun was momentarily confused, but he put the matter aside for the time being and went to Sun-ae's hospital room, informing her that his name had been cleared. The three of them were chatting happily when Hae-jun's gaze fell on the pile of gifts nearby. Tucked between the gift baskets was a matchbox with a note that read, "I'm so glad you're awake. See you soon." It seemed like the culprit had been there. To destroy the evidence he'd left behind, he wanted to eliminate Sun-ae. The police had no choice but to have Sun-ae escorted home first. When he saw that only 2 officers had arrived, Hae-jun was momentarily dissatisfied. He guessed that the police didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so they were downplaying the victim's safety, only sending 2 people. Dong-sik was at a loss for words, unable to argue. The more Dong-sik thought about it, the more something felt off. He hastily opened the evidence box and found that the piece of paper from the matchbox from the night Sun-ae was kidnapped had vanished without a trace. Just then, he overheard the complaints of 2 colleagues. Rumor had it that there was a lot of pressure from higher-ups recently. The team leader was at risk of losing his job, so he rushed everyone to close the case and pin it on Min-soo as the real killer. Seeing that the police were trying to cover up the case, disregarding the safety of the victims, Hae-jun was furious. He went to Sun-ae's parents to discuss the matter. He wanted to contact reporters and expose this to the media, using public pressure to force the police to launch a full-scale investigation. Only then would the culprit be too afraid to act recklessly, ensuring Sun-ae's safety. But if the matter were made public, Sun-ae would have to come forward and recount the details of what happened that day. Although her face would be blurred and her voice altered, her parents were still worried that the culprit would recognize their daughter and retaliate even more fiercely. Just as her father was hesitating, Sun-ae emerged from her room. She agreed to be interviewed, no longer wanting to hide in fear. So the next day, Sun-ae was interviewed by the television station. Dong-sik even brought the killer's threatening note to add more credibility to Sun-ae's words. Hae-jun also learned from him that the note from the matchbox had disappeared. Suspecting that the police were trying to cover up the case, Hae-jun became even more determined to push for public exposure. Before long, a large number of reporters descended upon the village to report on the serial murders. Under pressure from the public and accusations from the media, the police station had no choice but to send more officers to guard the victims' homes 24/7. Seeing things escalating and wanting to close the case as soon as possible, the police were determined to make Min-soo take the fall. Hae-jun and Dong-sik had anticipated this and prepared evidence to prove his innocence. Dong-sik rushed to investigate all the taxis that were running on the night of the incident. Hae-jun successfully obtained the medical records, which also served as an alibi that would help Min-soo. Hae-jun personally handed it over to the reporters, urging them to put this important news on the front page. Very quickly, Min-soo was cleared of charges and released. As soon as he was released, he immediately went to find Mi-suk, taking his wayward sister home to settle the score. Yeon-young happened to see this scene and went up to them, pretending to strike up a conversation, as if she had a prior appointment with Mi-suk. There's no way Min-soo wouldn't see that she was trying to help his sister, but since he had just been released, he was in a good mood, so he decided to let his sister off the hook this time. Mi-suk was very grateful to Yeon-young for helping her, but just thinking about her brother being released, and that what awaited her was still a storm, Mi-suk couldn't help but sob. At the same time, Hae-jun was passing by the Bongbong tea house and happened to see the owner, Chung-ae, packing up. She picked up a metal box she was about to throw away. Inside was a pile of baby clothes. She looked very reluctant. Seeing this scene, Hae-jun was a bit confused. It seemed that the mother loved her unborn child, so why did she coldly abandon him back then? Chung-ae finished packing and came out to see Hae-jun standing blankly in front of the door. Since it was getting late, she asked Hae-jun to take her to the bus station. The two walked all the way to the bus station. Hae-jun wondered why Chung-ae was still holding onto the box of baby things. Chung-ae looked at the box and smiled. These were all things she had prepared for her unborn child. Just thinking about the child wearing the clothes she had prepared made her feel very happy. Hearing this, Hae-jun was even more confused. Clearly, she was looking forward to the child's arrival. So why did she hurriedly close the tea house and leave the village like that? Chung-ae whispered that it was because she herself didn't know what to do. After saying this, she said goodbye to Hae-jun and got on the bus, leaving. Disheartened, Hae-jun went to the principal's house to borrow his car and took Yun-Yong to the beach to relax. The blue sea, white clouds, and golden sunshine really did improve one's mood. He even took Yun-Yong to eat rice cakes, and then for a walk along the beach, taking the opportunity to confess his feelings, saying he would do all the things she liked with her. Yun-Yong noticed Hae-jun's unusual behavior today and pressed him for the reason. Hae-jun didn't say much, only assuring her that he would be fine and telling Yun-Yong not to worry, to wait for him to return. That evening, the TV started broadcasting detailed reports about the murder case in Wujung village. Towards the end of the program, Hae-jun unexpectedly appeared on the screen as a witness to the case, saying that he had seen the killer's true face that night. The person was wearing a black hat, a black coat, and had scratches on their back. Yun-Yong was extremely surprised after watching the news. Why wasn't his face blurred out? Was it intentionally done so the culprit could see him? Worried, she immediately ran out to find Hae-jun. At this moment, Hae-jun was walking alone on the road, quietly waiting for the culprit to appear. Dong-sik was also hiding not far away, ready to ambush, just waiting for the right moment to capture the murderer. Sure enough, not long after, footsteps could be heard on the quiet street. Just as they were about to rush out, they discovered that the person who had come was the tea house owner, Chung-ae. It turned out that Chung-ae saw the news on TV and rushed back. She knew that everything Hae-jun said was a lie. She didn't want Hae-jun to be in danger, so she came back to convince him to leave quickly. Hae-jun wondered why she was so sure he didn't see the murderer's face, because if he had seen his face, he wouldn't be able not to know. What did this statement mean? Could it be that Chung-ae knew who he was? Having said this, Chung-ae took out a baby hat that she had knitted herself. Hae-jun immediately recognized that the yarn used to knit the hat was the same as the yarn the culprit used to tie up the victims. Chung-ae burst into tears. The reason she left this village was because of fear. She couldn't be with that kind of person, and even the thought that the child in her womb was related by blood to him was so terrifying. She no longer looked forward to the child's birth. He hurried into the garage and found that the car was gone without a trace. At this moment, Yeon-yu was outside, about to enter the house, when he was startled by the sound of Dong-sik hiding nearby. Without a word, he immediately turned and ran. Dong-sik quickly gave chase. Hae-jun heard the noise and quickly took a shortcut to block the entrance of the tunnel, only to be knocked down by the car. Yeon-yu opened the car door and got out, his eyes full of hatred as he stared at Hae-jun. Yun-young saw the image of Hae-jun, provoking the culprit on the news, and immediately guessed that he was in danger. She rushed home, only to find that Hae-jun was nowhere to be found. While she was worrying, Mi-suk suddenly showed up. Yun-young urgently asked her who the culprit was. The plan to frame her brother had failed, and Mi-suk had no reason to hide it anymore. She directly told Yun-young that the culprit was the principal's son, Yeon-yu. Yun-young was shocked and couldn't believe it. She immediately ran off to find Hae-jun, not forgetting to grab Officer Dong-sik along the way. At the same time, at the tunnel, Hae-jun risked his life to stand in front of the car, only to be knocked down and sent rolling on the ground. Yeon-yu, with a vicious look in his eyes, approached and continuously punched and kicked Hae-jun until he could no longer stand up. He picked up a brick nearby, ready to deal Hae-jun a fatal blow. At that critical moment, Yun-young and Dong-sik arrived just in time, and Yeon-yu was caught red-handed. Principal Jun, upon hearing that his son was the culprit, was so shocked he could barely stand, almost fainting. Hearing that Hae-jun was still unconscious in the hospital, he rushed over with worry. Seeing his pale grandson lying in the hospital bed, Principal Jun was heartbroken. Seeing this, Yun-young couldn't hold back her tears either. For Yeon. Knowing that your father was a murderer, how much pain must that be? While the victims were suffering untold pain, the culprit in jail was incredibly arrogant. He constantly complained that his wounds hurt and he wanted to go to the hospital, and even mocked Dong-sik, saying he had no evidence to prove he was the culprit. Dong-sik looked at the madman in front of him and just wanted to jump up and bite his head off. In the hospital, Hae-jun finally woke up. Hearing that the real culprit had been caught, he breathed a sigh of relief, but didn't dare to directly meet Yun-young's eyes. Because his father was the one who caused her to lose her family, he felt extremely guilty. Yun-young's eyes were red-rimmed. The one who caused all this was your father, not you. She didn't want Hae-jun to live in pain with such tormenting thoughts. Just then, Dong-sik came to the hospital room to visit Hae-jun and also talk about the case. He sighed and said that the police had searched all of Yeon-yu's residences, but couldn't find any evidence. Someone as intelligent as him would have definitely cleaned everything up long ago. If they could get a sample of his handwriting and compare it with the handwriting on the piece of paper at the crime scene, the case would be solved. Hae-jun racked his brain, trying to remember. When he was little, his father once sent a letter from America. As soon as his grandfather saw the handwriting on the letter, his face changed, and he angrily snatched it away. Hae-jun suddenly realized that perhaps his grandfather had known all along that his son was the culprit. He immediately changed his clothes and went to find his grandfather. At the same time, the tea house owner, Chung-ae, carrying a box, went to see Principal Jun. She took out a stack of letters, saying that these were all letters written to her by Yeon-yu when he was still in America. The handwriting in the letters and the handwriting the killer left at the crime scene were identical. Yeon-yu had once said that he wanted to write in a special way that was only for the person he loved. So he used his other hand to write. At first, Chung-ah thought it was romantic, until she saw the piece of paper the killer left in the matchbox. She really wanted to tell the truth, but thinking about the child in her womb, all she could do was run away. Now she was handing over all this evidence to Principal Jun. What he wanted to do with it was his choice. The scene changes. Principal Jun is standing in front of a bonfire, burning the letters one by one. Just then, Hae-jun arrives and, seeing this, rushes up to snatch them away. Hae-jun couldn't believe that his grandfather was trying to cover up the truth. Principal Jun also had his own pain. He couldn't let his grandson carry the name of being a murderer's son, to be shunned by the world. He hoped that his grandson could live a normal and happy life in the future. Hae-jun's eyes were red-rimmed as he loudly rebuked his grandfather, telling him not to use his future as an excuse. In the future, in order to cover up his son's crimes, he never lived a single day in peace, and even coldly distanced himself from his grandson, until the day he died. Himself could only see his grandfather's back. Enduring a childhood full of pain and misery, Principal Jun fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Hae-jun coldly turned and left, handing the evidence over to the police. Everything was finally brought to light. Yeon-yu was arrested, spending the rest of his life behind bars. Hae-jun planned to return that night, wanting to see if the future would change after all. But seeing the hesitation in Yeon-yong's eyes, he decided to give her one more day to say goodbye to her parents. They would leave tomorrow night. Yeon-yong naturally agreed happily. The next day, she went to see her father. She used all her savings to buy her father the guitar he had long desired. Baek-hui scolded Yeon-yong for spending so much money to buy him a guitar. Nagging and rambling for half the day, Yeon-yong got bored and turned away, not wanting to listen anymore. Though he complained, Baek-hui loved that guitar to pieces, hugging it tightly. Yeon-yong used the guitar to bribe her brother, telling him that in the future, he must treat their mother well. And no matter what difficulties they faced, they must never leave each other. She had to leave, and it might be a very, very long time before they could meet again. Yeon-yong spoke with tears in her eyes. Baek-hui suddenly felt an inexplicable sadness. Yeon-yong thus said goodbye to her father, hoping that this time he could live happily, freely pursuing his dreams. Hae-jun went to see his father one last time. Now he was no longer curious about the reason why he killed him, because that future was gone. Yeon-yu, hearing him talk about the future, remembered one day when he was fixing the car. He accidentally discovered the hidden room behind the door. He smashed the glass and snuck into Hae-jun's secret room. He saw many reports from the future about the case, and even the instruction manual for the time machine. At that time, Yeon-yu had guessed that Hae-jun was from the future, because in the future he killed Hae-jun. Hae-jun came back for revenge. Hae-jun didn't answer that question, only wondering why his father, being so intelligent, was careless enough to keep those letters, which were important evidence. Did he really love his mother? Yeon-yu took off his glasses. That's right, he really did love Chung-ae very much. It turned out that, when he was young, Yeon-yu always only saw his mother's back as she was reading, never feeling any love from her at all. Until he was 7 years old, she left with a book. No longer wanting to be a mother, abandoned by the person who should have loved him the most, Yeon-yu was thus psychologically scarred. Every time he remembered, he quietly endured the pain alone. He swore that if he ever had children, he would never let them live such a life. Hae-jun was extremely angry. He himself had destroyed everything. Just a little bit more, and his dream would have come true. But Hae-jun was also very glad that his mother was able to escape the sea of suffering. Get away from that scumbag of a man. After saying this, Hae-jun left a photo on the table and got up to leave. Yeon-yu looked at the photo of himself and Hae-jun and was stunned. It turned out that Hae-jun was his son, and in the future, he himself killed his own son. Yeon-yong went to say goodbye to her mother. Sun-ae cried her heart out, asking when the two would meet again. About 34 years from now, at her nephew's house. Sun-ae spoke up indignantly. You might as well have said we wouldn't meet again until death. Yeon-yong calmly comforted Sun-ae. She was very happy to have come here, to meet her mother again in her youth, and to change everything. They would definitely meet again in the future. After saying this, she hugged her mother tightly. The car started up and arrived at the tunnel. Hae-jun turned the time back to 2021 and began to travel. But unexpectedly, after passing through the tunnel, both of them suddenly found themselves still there. Could it be that they were stuck in this time? Unable to return to modern times, and with the time travel system's battery running low. This was a situation Hae-jun had never encountered before. He pretended to be calm to reassure Yoon-young, saying that as long as they continued to fix the time machine, they would be able to return. Of course, Yoon-young wasn't easily fooled. She began to question the origin of the time machine, and the answer left her stunned. It turned out that this miraculous machine was something Hae-jun accidentally found on the side of the road. Even money on the street is hard to pick up, let alone a big car like that. Hae-jun remembered that day. It was pouring rain in the afternoon. The GPS on the car suddenly malfunctioned, and the visibility ahead was also a bit blurry. He just drove around without knowing exactly where he was. He drove and drove until he reached a tunnel and saw the time machine with its lights on and the door open. Inside the car, there was also an instruction manual telling him to drive through the old tunnel ahead. Hae-jun carefully recalled the strange points weren't just that. On the day he hit Yoon-young while driving, he suddenly received a phone call. The person on the other end said something very strange. "You are the only one who can resolve this matter from beginning to end." Hae-jun got distracted and bumped into Yoon-young, pulling her back to the past with him. Now that he thought about it, that phone call was really baffling. On the way back, the two walked and talked, laughing happily. If one were alone, being stuck in this unfamiliar time would indeed be a bit scary. Fortunately, the lovers could be together, fighting to overcome their fear. Preparing for the worst-case scenario, Hae-jun began to repair the time machine. Yoon-young said out loud that it wouldn't matter if they couldn't go back, but her eyes completely betrayed her. She cared deeply about the time machine and always stood outside, secretly watching Hae-jun's repair process. Hae-jun got annoyed and chased her away, telling her not to disturb him. Bored, Yoon-young went to her mother to chat. Sunay's debut novel had been successfully published. The trio of school bullies, who used to torment her, also came to buy her novel. They had changed their ways and would no longer bully Sunay in the future, even hoping she would return to school soon. Sunay gave Yoon-young the first published book, even adding an author's signature and message as a special gift. Yoon-young received the gift and hugged her emotionally. This was the most wonderful gift in her life. Hae-jun went to Principal Jun's house to visit him. The front door was plastered with abusive and insulting messages. Principal Jun was sitting alone inside, drinking to drown his sorrows. Seeing Hae-jun arrive, he was extremely surprised. He thought his grandson would despise the family and choose to leave without saying goodbye. Hae-jun had originally intended to do so, but the time machine broke down, and he got stuck here. Previously, Hae-jun didn't want to say goodbye to his grandfather, because he felt that it was all his fault that he was now facing these troubles. The principal comforted Hae-jun, saying he didn't hate him at all, and was even grateful that he had given him another chance to make amends. Hearing his grandfather's words, Hae-jun felt more at ease. Seeing that the time machine would take a long time to repair, Hae-jun was downcast and dejected. Yoon-young suggested that they take advantage of this time to create beautiful memories with their family members here. So, the next day, Hae-jun invited his grandfather to go fishing. The two of them enjoyed a peaceful and happy time together. Hae-jun once had a dream of living a normal life, working, then retiring and leisurely going fishing. But after going through so much, now he wished he could be with his family more. His grandfather encouraged him to pursue his dreams, saying he would do everything in his power to help his grandson make it a reality. On Yoon-young's side, she went with her parents to the park to race bicycles. Sunay excitedly rode ahead. Baek-hwi was about to follow when he saw Yoon-young just standing still, not moving. Turns out, she didn't know how to ride a bicycle. Baek-hwi smiled and kicked down the kickstand. Yoon-young glared at him angrily, saying that because her father had a bad leg, he couldn't teach her how to ride a bike. So, the young father, Baek-hwi, for the first time, held his daughter's hand to teach her to ride a bike, even swearing he wouldn't let go. Yoon-young happily rode for a while, looked back and didn't see anyone behind her, got scared, and promptly fell. Sunay, upon hearing this, scolded her boyfriend for daring to bully Yoon-young, giving him a few smacks for good measure. Baek-hwi enthusiastically fed her rice cakes as an apology. Seeing her parents happily teasing each other in front of her, Yoon-young was moved to tears. This was a time she had never experienced before, seemingly seeing again the happy of herself with her parents when she was little. After saying goodbye to her parents, Yoon-young returned home to see Hae-jun waiting for her at the door. He told her some good news: the car was fixed. It turned out that just now, when Hae-jun was still racking his brain, not knowing what to do, a young man suddenly appeared. He was the one who called Hae-jun that night. Hae-jun immediately went on alert, but unexpectedly, the other person hugged him tightly. "I missed you so much, Dad." It turned out that the time machine was left by Hae-jun's son, and this time, he came here to fix it for him. The car was fixed, and it was time for the two to return. Before leaving, Hae-jun went to see his mother one last time. He understood now why, after giving birth to him, she left him to be raised by his grandfather. And he understood her pain. Hae-jun hoped that his mother could live well in the future, and not feel self-blame, because he would no longer resent her. His mother brought him into this world, and that alone was enough for him to be grateful for the rest of his life. After saying goodbye to their loved ones, the two also began to prepare for departure. Yun-yang was worried that the time machine might break down again midway, but Hae-jun swore that this time it was really fixed properly. His son told Hae-jun that, in fact, he didn't die in the future, he himself had saved him. His son gave him a chance to make a different choice, and fortunately, Hae-jun didn't disappoint him, changing everything. Hae-jun briefly explained the reason to Yun-yang, only the truth about his son was not revealed. The two once again went to the tunnel, calmly taking deep breaths. Hae-jun adjusted the time to 2021 and stepped on the gas. Successfully passing through the tunnel, the two quickly looked around. At this time, their phones were constantly ringing. Picking up the phone to check, both of them simultaneously smiled with satisfaction. They had returned to their own time. Hae-jun received a call from his grandfather. Then it was Yun-yang's turn to receive a call from her mother. She nervously picked up the phone, heard her mother's voice on the other end, and burst into tears of joy. She returned to her current home. They no longer lived in the small, cramped house, but had moved to a bigger one. The house was also filled with books. Her mother was still using the pen that Yun-yang had given her long ago, and she also saw her mother return from the dead. Her father's leg was no longer disabled. The two embraced each other, sobbing. After a month apart, she finally met her deceased mother again. At the same time, Hae-jun went to see his grandfather. The house was filled with pictures of his grandfather fishing. Since that parting, he had formed a habit of fishing, using it to kill time, waiting for the day his grandson returned to reunite. Yun-yang became an editor for her mother. Sometimes there would be disagreements between the two, naturally mediated by her brother. Life was happy and full of laughter. He opened his bar, and Yun-yang often visited, listening to her father play guitar while writing her novel. Every evening, Yun-yang would faithfully watch the news program hosted by Hae-jun, and then wait for him in front of the TV station for their dates. Not only that, but every once in a while, the three of them would go out to eat and shop together as a family. On one occasion, Yun-yang ran into Mi-suk again. The two looked at each other for a moment. Then Mi-suk turned and walked away. Hae-jun still hadn't told Yun-yang that the person who helped them fix the car was their future son. The son, watching his mother from afar, couldn't help but exclaim, "Those who belong together will always meet no matter what." No matter the time or space, his parents would still meet and fall in love. Hae-jun took the opportunity to ask his son what Yun-yang liked the most. Unexpectedly, the answer was himself. Mom loves Dad the most in the world, but occasionally, she also likes it when Dad buys her flowers. Taking his son's suggestion, the next day he bought flowers for Yun-yang. The couple held hands and strolled along the beach. Yun-yang curiously asked Hae-jun about the time machine. It only had enough power for one more time travel. As it happened, tomorrow was May 16th, the day Hae-jun's father committed his first murder. The two decided to make the trip back to 1987 one last time, trying their best to save the victims who died. Even if they got stuck, it wouldn't matter. Hae-jun believed that their son would definitely be able to find them. The encounter between him and Yun-yang was not a coincidence, but a design of destiny. The film ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel, so I can be motivated to make more great videos. Thank you.